Says we're live. Hopefully we actually are live. Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart. Today we're going to be talking about the best looking Nintendo Switch games. We're going to be discussing different games that we personally found to be the lookers, and then comparing them to some games that have been coming out this year. And then also talking about some information suggesting next generation hardware. Creatures Inc. from Pokémon Company Nintendo is hiring for next gen development. And this is all interesting considering the games that are coming out right now, like Bayonetta 3, and we just got Splatoon, and Xenoblade a few months beforehand, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are coming out. And we take a look at these games and their limitations or innovations with what they were able to do with the hardware. It's interesting considering how far we're into the Switch's life cycle and what could be coming around the corner. So we're kind of talking about all of that today. That's the general plan. But before we jump into things, let me first introduce my co-host, Brandon, who I now realize looks like a Viking. How are you, buddy?
Do I? Do I look like a Viking? I don't have any Swedish or other Nordish blood in me.
I'm just referring to the fact that you have a beard and a mustache and a lot of hair, and I just realized that. I was like talking to you for about 10 minutes, and I just realized all the hair you have on your face. It's neat. It's well kept.
Yes.
I'm just letting it grow out. It's just there's a good amount there, more than I can grow.
Beard comb or something.
Okay.
But I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about graphics more on the podcast. That's something we don't always cover, but it's like something I'm super into. If you guys who listen to the podcast probably know that I'm super into tech and graphics and stuff, so I have a lot of thoughts on this in general. So,
yeah. I was freaking out because I didn't see anyone in the chat, and I was like, man, the podcast really is dying. No, people are in the chat. My chat just didn't load. I refreshed, and there's a whole bunch of people here. So awesome. Thank you guys for being here. Please let me know how everything is looking and sounding. I'm doing something slightly different with my microphone, and there may be more adjustments, so just let me know how everything's looking and sounding. Actually, there's a weird glitch on my computer where I had to add other audio sources, but whatever. Just let me know if everything sounds okay, and if not, we will adjust. But let's jump in the chat here. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A for maybe about 15-ish minutes, and then we're going to have a good solid discussion talking about everything I just introduced. And then we'll close out with a little bit more Q&A. This is not going to be a long podcast, I think, but
we shall see.
Many a time I have said this is not going to be a long one, and then 3 hours later, I'm like, my God, that should have been half the time, but we couldn't stop talking. So there you go. But let's check in with the chat here. The Megaton Menace. How's Bayonetta 3? So I have Bayonetta 3. I played the beginning of Bayonetta 3. But I've said this before, but I am not going to play through it until I finish Bayonetta 1 and 2. So right now, I'm actually playing through Bayonetta 1, and I'm almost done with it. I think I'm definitely finishing it this week, and I'm going to jump straight into Bayonetta 2, probably steamroll through that one, and then get back onto Bayonetta 3. I may, touch Bayonetta 3 here and there just because, I may cover it or talk about it a little bit, as I did. I made sure to play the beginning of the game so I could have a good wrap on how the game looks and plays. But I haven't been going through it because I'm focused on just playing through the entire series. So, perhaps in a few weeks I'll probably have more thoughts to kind of share on the overall series, including Bayonetta 3, but I haven't gone in deep. No.
Yeah. I told you on Twitter, but I'm not sure if I'll get Bayonetta 3 on Switch, because I need to play through 1 and 2. Bayonetta's an action game, so you don't really have to, but I've been meaning to play those. And, I feel like any game series is usually better if you play the other one to get a little bit more context, what's going on. I always like to do that anyways, and not to start the topic before we end the Q&A, but the game has been subject of controversy about how it looks, and more for me, just how it runs. And I've had some people who get really mad at me for even commenting on this since I haven't played the game, which I feel is weird because I'm not commenting on the game itself, I'm commenting on actual factual information about the game. But anyways, just to let you know, I haven't played it, but I've seen the numbers, so I don't know. But there's some people are weird about that. But I don't know. We'll see what we'll talk more about it in a bit. But we'll see if I end up buying it on Switch or if I wait for a more powerful Switch to come out. Because those frame rates for a fast-paced action game is just not for me.
And I think just kind of an interesting point, just to take away from what you're saying, you're talking about as if you sort of believe there's a really high likelihood that this game will be running and playing better on new hardware in the future.
Well, assuming that new hardware comes out and it supports backwards compatibility, like automatically it would run a lot better, I would assume.
Yeah.
Unless they have some kind of backwards compatibility mode that limits the clock so severely that it runs exactly like the original Switch, which doesn't seem likely. Because even like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, they have like modes, but they still run better than the... Anyways, it should work. Like, you should plug it into the Switch 2 and get that full 60 and that full resolution. So...
Yeah. We'll see. I'm holding back my thoughts on that, but I share some of your sentiments. Not that I am gonna play Bayonetta 3 on my Switch, and I mean I think it's gonna be fine enough for me, for what I've played so far.
Yeah, and I told you, like, if it take a long time coming out with the Switch 2, like if it doesn't come out till like 2025 or something, I'll probably end up playing Bayonetta 3 on the original Switch. But you know, if it comes out next year or 2024, I'll probably won't have time to play Bayonetta 3 yet. So
yeah. Let's put a pin on this.
I have time to play this game.
Let's put a pin on this because I know this is going to definitely tie into the meat and potatoes of our discussion tonight. So we'll come back to this. But hello there, DE Fox. Hello there, Charles Riddell. Good evening to you all. Paul Dunn, hello. Go Astros. Hey. Yeah, I don't personally care, but go Astros.
I don't care either, even though I live in Houston. Wee.
Yeah, you should care.
I think we won something at some point. Wee. I don't know.
Yeah, they won I think your baseball team won the World Series.
We won the World Series again?
Oh.
Dang. That's only the second time we've ever done that. We just won like a couple years ago.
Yeah. Well,
maybe the Houston Texans will win the Super Bowl someday, and I'll finally have something I should be excited about in terms of sports.
So, looks like a couple happy birthdays are in order. Hopefully you guys are still here. Having Hope 5, you're saying it's your birthday? Happy birthday. I wish you a very happy birthday, and I hope you enjoy the show. I'm glad that you're watching the podcast on your birthday. Man, that's awesome. I really, I'm glad that on your birthday,
we got a piece of cake
it's a Monday night. Let's listen to the On Just Restart podcast. By the way, I want to make sure they get their proper respects here, because someone suggested something to me about a week or so ago that I thought was pretty cool, and this is not 100%. Trying to find it. I need to find it. Oh, there we go. All right, so on October 27th, I saw a reply to one of my tweets for saying about coming back with a podcast. J.R.R. Tolkien, I'm not sure if you're in the chat right now, but if you are, I'm pointing this out. He said, when is the weekly restart, in parentheticals, that's what you should call your podcast coming back. And I thought about it for a second. That's actually a really good name for the show. I don't know if I'm going to do a full-on brand change for it, but unofficially, I'll at least allow it to be a nickname for the show, the Weekly Restart.
The Weekly Restart.
It's actually pretty good. Like, what do you think, Brandon? Do you think that the Weekly Restart is? It. Yeah. So J.R. Tolkien, bravo on that.
Good job,
bro. I don't know. It has a legitimate chance to maybe become the official title at some point or another. We'll see.
Short enough for sure. It's nice and concise.
Right. I think it's at least going to be a nickname. So the Weekly Restart, right? Like yeah. So, just felt like pointing out it's kind of cool. If you guys like the name, let me know. Right now, it's just the podcast.
Yeah. It's just the Andres Restart podcast.
Yeah. Alrighty. So another birthday is in order here. Super Chris, who's also a mod. Thank you for modding, my friend. And also, happy birthday to you as well. Many wishes. Good for all of you, truly. But also, the birthday wishes. I am sending them out. I am saying the good vibes, the good energies. Glad you guys are watching the show on the birthday, the weekly restart. That is appreciated, 100%. And I truly do hope you guys are having a wonderful birthday. Johnny Hernandez, Nintendo 6-month earnings tomorrow. That's actually going to be interesting, which also does tie in a little bit to our conversation, because we are kind of continuing this discussion about, is Nintendo ready to move on to next hardware? Last Friday I put out a video talking about, or rather questioning, is it time for Nintendo to move on to Nintendo Switch 2? And I actually noticed, not that there was a lot of hate or vitriol there, but there was more than usual. So, me being fully transparent here, and I feel like most content creators won't do this, right? It's not that I intentionally hide information, but there are just certain things that you don't necessarily talk about. I'll talk about this. So, the like to dislike ratio, okay? I don't normally talk about these things, right? But we do pay attention to them, right? And it's something that you guys can't even see because now YouTube hides it. So you have no idea how liked or disliked a video is. You can see the like counter, but it's kind of a relative number. Relative to what? And that's one of the reasons why I disliked that they got rid of the dislike button.
The only relative thing you have is, I guess, the view count. But even then,
I mean, but who like kind of covers those metrics, and it also depending on the genre of the time. There's so many other factors, right?
If it's like indecisive, it could be like the same amount of likes as dislikes.
Yeah.
You have no clue.
Well, the thing is, with the like to dislike ratio, you can gauge based off people who have seen it. It's not about how much views it has. It's based off people who have seen it. Because there are videos that are massively disliked that have tons of views. So the like to dislike ratio is great because you can kind of gauge like, oh, okay, is there like something about this video that's off? And truth be told, just because a video has like a high dislikes doesn't mean the video is bad. It just means that there was a force of nature or a collective that was not okay with the video for whatever reason. Sometimes it's dislike bombing. In the past, we've seen people create several accounts just to make one person look bad, right? Sometimes it's because that person that made the video, well, they had an unpopular opinion, or it's just a bad video, or someone chose a side and it's a very divisive topic, whereas there'll be two different sides. And I don't know if you noticed, but whenever we vote for a president, it's always like 40, 60, 55, 45. It's always very close, very divisive. Two completely different sides, but it's still the entire nation or of those who voted. Point is, yeah, there's different reasons why there can be a lot of dislikes. Anyways, with that all said, I'm not saying I have like a lot of dislikes on my videos. They're actually all pretty good. But typically when I see my videos, right, I can kind of gauge, you know, how, I guess, controversial I was. And it's happened where I've had videos below a 90% dislike ratio, but usually they're usually above 95. If something's like somewhat controversial, it'll be like in the 92 to 95 range, right? That video I'm talking about, though, the video where I was questioning, is it time for Nintendo to move on to Nintendo Switch 2? It was at a 90% dislike ratio. So that's not a bad ratio. I'm not complaining. I have no problem with people telling me they disliked the video, that they disagreed. All fine. I encourage it. I am simply stating, though, I noticed that compared to all my other videos as of late, there was more disagreement and negativity than usual, which to me was interesting.
Right.
And it's actually also interesting because sometimes I'll see maybe comments that suggest pessimistic perspectives or negativity, but the ratio won't also suggest that, right? So, yeah. And that I almost prefer because it shows that people are just sharing their opinion without necessarily wanting to attack the content creator, right? Because when you dislike a video, that's you trying to send a message to like you're against this video's existence, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Dislike is very, very strong. Like it's strange how we think about like is like okay, I guess they liked it, but if they dislike it, ho, you did not like that.
Like
stuff.
I almost never dislike a video. Like if I don't like it, just stop watching it, right?
Yeah.
And if I disagree with what's said there, I won't dislike the video. I'll just tell them my thoughts, right? But if it's like something where I think it's unethical, right? Or if I or if it's like really, really bad, that's when I might do it. But it's very rare, and sometimes I feel bad about doing it. So, anyways, the whole reason I bring it up, I'm like jumping from one tangent to another, is simply to state that I think that there's definitely a little bit of a controversy or a division when it comes to talking about Nintendo moving on to new hardware.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't feel like it should be that divisive because it's gonna happen. Like it's going to happen. And I think maybe something I brought up there though is that there are some sales numbers that are suggesting that we might be seeing a little bit of a dip because PlayStation 5 is starting to be switching sometimes, not overall, but sometimes. And I'm not saying Switch is gonna fail. I'm not saying Switch is gonna have poor sales. No, I think they're still gonna be strong. But it seems like there's going to be a trend downwards, right? And perhaps tomorrow, if that's the case, that we're getting more sales numbers, maybe we'll start to see a little bit of a trend. And we may even see Nintendo make mention of, hey, we're always thinking about what to do next, right? So really, it's just kind of, like, it's just reality. Like, this is how all console life cycles go. They rise, they reach a peak, and then they start to go downwards. Now, the question
eventually you've reached, like, most of the consumers who want to buy your product.
Yeah. But
eventually you're going to slow down.
The amazing thing about Switch, though, is that there hasn't been a price drop yet, right? We're approaching the 7-year anniversary this March, and there still hasn't been a price drop. So someone could argue that we're not even close to next generation hardware because even if there is like a bit of a sales dip now, Nintendo still hasn't like gone all out yet. They haven't done the price drop yet, right? So it may be the case that Nintendo does a price drop next year to combat, declining sales. That way they can lengthen the generation. But
on that specific point, do you want to talk about that, or do you want to wait?
I feel like I went on this huge tangent because
I have a lot of points.
It kind of needs to be addressed, right?
Topic.
Yeah. Touch on it. Not as bad. Hopefully not as. If you need to touch on it as much as I did for 10 minutes, I'm not gonna stop you because that's only fair. But it's my fault, honestly. But give me your thoughts on it, and then we'll put a pin on it, and then we'll come back to the chat, and then we'll come back. To put it
shortly, I think that there is room for them to price drop, but I think the problem is you think old hardware gets a lot cheaper, but we haven't really been seeing that because new stuff has been created so much that people aren't even making the old stuff anymore. So a lot of Switch costs is just like specific fabrications for old stuff nobody does anymore. So there is a lot of cost reduction they can do in actually switching to a new system versus trying to find a way to get the old system cheaper, which I believe is why they came up with the OLED in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, also we had the battery revision and the Switch Lite as well. Like they're just the part of the reason that they have revisions. To your point, it's not just about putting out new hardware so people buy it, so people have more reasons to buy a Switch. It's also because they want people to transition to buying those systems so they can shy away from the initial system because it's just easier to make the newer systems now because it's based off newer parts, which they don't make the older parts anymore, so it's actually harder to manufacture them.
Yep. So I would see if they don't come up with a whole new generation next year or the year after, they'll definitely like switch processes, I think. Like they'll do another kind of battery life.
Yeah, some other type of revision. Thing. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Because they do it every 2 years. So I think something for sure is coming next
year. I think they
would
have to do that to lower the price significantly.
Yeah. But
to keep their profit margins how they like it, obviously. They don't like to lose money on things. So if they were willing to lose money, they could drop it like $100 right now. But I think if they want to drop it like $50 or $100 and keep the profit margins, they're going to have to switch to a new system, which means only the new ones can be sold for less and actually like keep the profit margin. So I'm wondering if they'll ever do that at all.
I don't know.
But
the other thing is that like I'm curious to see how OLED cells are doing, because like I've thought about getting an OLED, but the reason I haven't gotten an OLED is because I think we're not that far away from a brand new Switch. Yeah. And the longer I wait, the closer we are to that, right? So I don't need a new Switch, but I definitely would. I like the idea of having OLED. I want like a bigger screen. I like that there's like that longer kickstand, because I actually like tabletop mode. Tabletop mode is cool. Why is it cool? Because you can kind of just set it there. You don't have to hold in your hand. Sometimes poor mode's a little uncomfortable. And let's say you have your Pro controller.
You get, like cramps in your hands. And stuff.
Yeah, or sometimes you just want to play your game with your Pro controller instead, right? And not like in handheld, no, like with the Joy-Cons. And but if you're not with your TV, you know, that you have to use tabletop mode. But the basic kicks down the Switch is kind of garbage. So you know it's a lot harder to pull that off. And then with the bigger, more vibrant screen, tabletop mode actually holds up a little bit more than it does on the base Switch. So that's kind of why I've sort of like I've kind of wanted to get the OLED, but I'm holding off because I think we're getting close, but I don't know. For one thing's for sure, the OLED's not going to be like, there's going to be a next generation piece of hardware that will come out in less than 5 years, right? And I've had my Switch since launch day, right? So if I get an OLED, it's not going to get nearly as much run as my initial Switch. So that's the other like perspective. Even if we were like maybe a year
values for it though.
Yeah, well that's true. I could
better
trade
resale,
it in.
Better trade in.
And that's true. Like if I just trade it in, then maybe you know I can kind of have a nicer Switch now, and then trade it in. And yes, overall I'll probably still end up spending more money, but it's not that much more money. It's not as much. It's not a whole Switch OLED's worth of money. But let's get back to the chat here, because I did promise that we'd start Q&A, and then you know. So, coming back to the chat, let's see here. Charles Riddell agrees you look like a bit like a Viking, Brandon. People like it. People like the look, man. Yeah, feel good about it. It's not an insult.
Gotta get some tattoos.
Let's see here. I had a bit of a chat jump, so I got lost where I was at. Hello there, Joycey J. How are you? Paul Salvador, hello. Good evening. The Zesty Car. It's been a while since they've seen your face, apparently, Brandon.
I mean, it's been a couple weeks since I've been on the podcast in general, so.
Yeah, we had a break. I mean, you're right, because
we had a break.
We had a 2-week plus break.
I had my headphones break.
Yeah. So it might even be like a month.
It's been a bit.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Things kept happening, and then even when I was gonna be on, when we were actually doing it, like stuff happened like right before. And I was like, gosh. So, but I'm excited to be on now. Talk about my favorite thing to talk about. Tech and graphics and things.
Graphics. All right, we'll get to it. But I promise I'll get to the chat first. So, Having Hope 5 says everything looks and sounds great. Thank you very much, and happy birthday again. A guy you don't know added me. Hey there, didn't expect the podcast about graphics, specifically on Switch, but here we are. So we're going to be talking about it. I'm not really like a graphics techie head. Brandon more is. So my job... I feel like
Switch has some of the most interesting graphics talk because of its limited power budget.
Yeah. My job tonight is to make it seem less like tech mumbo jumbo and make it seem more...
He's going to be my translator.
So what's going to happen, he's going to be like... The DLSS GXTX F9 PR AR simulator is going to be amazing. And I'm going to be like, so what you're telling me is the games are going to look a little bit better.
Oh.
And you're going to be like, yeah. I'm like, oh, see?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so here we are. Having Hope, you love it on the TV. Yes, Xenoblade 3 is awesome. I did beat it. I do want to get around to playing some of the post-game, but right now I'm focusing on Bayonetta, and then Pokemon's right around the corner. So, you know, in terms of what I'm playing, I'm busy. Making your podcast rounds, Joey CJ, okay. Yes, I am playing Bayonetta, and I'm actually really liking it, right? So, well, while I'm not playing through Bayonetta 3 yet, and I will, I'm actually really enjoying Bayonetta because now I'm fully getting into it. Like I've played them in the past, but I've never played them from beginning to end to actually beat them, and I'm actually like fully diving in. I'm getting invested. I'm actually learning more about the story and the world, which by the way seems a little convoluted, but I'm getting by. But I'm just enjoying the experience, right? I enjoy the theatrics. I enjoy how grandiose the series is. I enjoy how whimsical it is. Like, the characters are fun. There's lots of puns and jokes, and there's just crazy action sequences. The game is about fun. Like, ultimately, that's what Bayonetta is.
Yeah.
It's not something you're supposed to take super serious. It's not a drama. It's just like fun. And when I say fun, like, I mean in different ways. Like, Bayonetta is going to do some sort of crazy combo where she's just going to beat the hell out of something, but it's going to be kind of hilarious at the same time, right? Like, she might take, like, this super hot, like, alien demon chick or something, or angel chick, and then she's going to put her on a torture device and just, like, break her, which may sound really gruesome, but in the context of the game, it's kind of funny. Because they had, like, a bit of, like a duel, like, because at one point, like, this angel chick was pretending to be Bayonetta, and they were both like having sexy dances competing against each other, and then it ended up being a fight, and then she just like destroyed her. But anyway, it's just random. It's very random, and I think that's something else to take into consideration. Like, what I just talked about, out of context, probably just sounds like really weird. And Bayonetta is really weird, but when you start it from beginning and you sort of start to buy into it, you have an understanding of the context, and it grows on you. Because you might, if you start Bayonetta 1 and you see the opening sequence, you're like, yeah, this is weird. It starts off with this woman dressed as a nun, like saying some sort of prayer to some gravestone, and then all of a sudden these weird alien things come out of nowhere, and they're supposed to be angels, but they're like disgusting, and like Bayonetta like changes.
Angels are disgusting. If you know anything about like angels, like the actual descriptions from Ye Olde Biblioteca, very, very gruesome. Very
maybe they're
millions of eyes and wings and
well, like, then I guess
just like there's this one that's described as a giant flaming wheel covered in thousands of eyes. That's all it is.
You know what's funny? Like, I mean, if you play through Bayonetta, like,
pretty sure those are in the game.
It's actually like fairly. There's a lot of things that are very similar to what you described in there. So
yeah, they're trying to go for like accurate angels, which are scary as hell.
Yeah, I mean, typically angels are depicted as these beautiful people.
There's a reason every time like you'll hear stories about like angels coming to visit people, they're always like terrified. It's because it's not because it's a crazy event. It's because they actually are terrified of this giant monster flying down the sky at them. Just like, what is happening?
And it was also interesting. Like, this is going away from video games. This is going more to like crazy like theories on reality and like what's that guy?
Supernatural stuff?
Aliens.
Aliens.
Yeah. Like, there's some speculation that if aliens are real, the aliens that have like visited people throughout history have been depicted in angels through stories. Like, they're actually one and the same thing. It's just how they were interpreted.
Could be.
I mean, if you think about it, what is an angel? It's an angel from another realm. It's a creature that we don't entirely understand. It's like
came from the sky.
It's far more intelligent than we are, right? So you could define, like, from a dictionary perspective, an angel is an alien, right? Something that's simply alien to your environment. If it's not from where you came, it's alien. So just kind of an interesting little thing. But anyways, let's come back to let's come back to Earth here. Moving on to chat. Dominic Sanchez added me. When do you think Odyssey 2, the next mainline 3D Mario, will come out? I think it will come out holiday 2024. No. Rewind. Holiday 2023. Latest holiday 2024. That's my window. But I feel if I have to put money, I would say holiday 2023.
I don't know why I feel like it's already 2023. You said that. You said 2024, and I was like, oh yeah, next year.
Right. No, that's what happened to me as well. Like, my brain's already 2023, but we're still in 2022. Yeah, bro. Yeah. Jesus, time is passing by so quickly. Yeah. But that's when I think they're gonna focus on the marketing the Mario movie and Zelda early next year. If new hardware is launching early next year, they'll focus on that too. If not, I think they'll worry about that after Zelda and the Mario movie, and also this 3D Mario. So like basically, if they're not going to launch the new hardware with Zelda, I think they're gonna launch it with Mario. And I think it makes sense for this Mario game to come out holiday, right? Because Zelda's coming out May, and Pokemon just came out, and Splatoon just came out, and Mario Kart still has its DLC, and Smash just finished. What other major games could Nintendo have to be a proper launch title to push new hardware? Some people may argue, well, Metroid Prime 4. And the problem with that is, one, if we assume we need to at least get Metroid Prime Remake before Prime 4, then Prime Remake probably needs to come out next year. And I don't think both come out in the same year. I mean, maybe they could, but it just seems unlikely to me.
I doubt it.
At this point, I think Prime 4 is a 2024 title, not a 2023 title. So now you could think, well, guess what? Switch 2 is not coming out until 2024. Also possible. But regardless of whether or not that may be the case, there still needs to be a big holiday game so next year, right? I feel actually Nintendo's actually had slightly weak holiday lineups for the last couple years. When I say weak, I just mean they haven't had like a Megaton release, right? They've had like a lot of.
That's pretty true.
They've had a lot of like.
They haven't had a killer app.
B tier titles, like good titles. Xenoblade, Splatoon, Metroid Dread, like they're all amazing games, but they're not a game of the year kind of games. You know, like there's definitely like there's a difference. For sure. You know, and Tears of the Kingdom is that kind of game, but it's coming out in May. So I'm just kind of curious what Nintendo's gonna have for next year, and I think it's gonna be the next Mario, but we'll see.
Slot for it.
What?
Hopefully, I mean it's been almost as long as in between the last 3D Mario Odyssey and now as it has been for the last 3D Zelda, and we haven't even seen anything of the 3D Mario.
You know what's interesting?
Absolutely insane.
If the 3D Mario comes out, if it comes out next November, the gap between the Zelda and the gap between Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey could be the same kind of gap between Tears of the Kingdom and whatever this next Mario is. It'd be very similar.
I think it'd be 1 month less.
Yes.
Because we're delaying it 2 months out from March. It'd be 2 months from October. It'd be December.
Well, I think Breath of the Wild came out March 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it May 15th or something?
May 12th.
12th. Okay.
So what? So it's like a difference of 9 weeks.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I mean,
close.
It'll be close. Is the point? Yeah. Hello there, Gone Hunter. How are you? All right. So Tracy G, the frame. I'm pretty sure it's in reference to Bayonetta. The frame rate must be off for some people. I haven't had any problems. Breath of the Wild 1 had and has more frame drops than any other Switch game I've played. Bayo 3 isn't unplayable.
I will say, I'm trying to figure out why you feel this way, because to say that Zelda has more frame drops than any other Switch game is obviously wrong. Maybe even if you don't play that many Switch games, Zelda does not drop that often. It's just pretty much only in the Korok Forest and like a couple of those spots on the map. Otherwise, it's fine. I would say maybe you notice it more because it's dropping from 30 FPS all the way down to, I believe, 20 FPS every single time it drops, which is a huge notice compared to an unstable 40 to 60.
Noticeable in Breath of the Wild, but I also think we've
probably the frame rate drops in
more Breath of the Wild than other games.
Almost in the moment.
I think that's another thing to consider because we've played Breath of the Wild more. We're more acquainted with the frame drops than in other games, if that makes sense, right? Considering how much we've played Breath of the Wild, like you can. I
would say it's the issue is when it's running at 30 max, right? Versus a game running 60 max. So any frame drops, you're gonna feel it way more.
Yeah, from what I understand, Bayonetta 3,
Breath of the Wild is double buffered V-synced, and what this means is instead of dropping like down to like 29 or 28 FPS, it will always, every single time, drop immediately down to 20 FPS. No matter what. Like, if there's a frame drop, unless it has to drop further, which I don't think it ever does. But theoretically, it could go down to below 20. But even if it only would drop to like 28, it'll drop all the way down to 20, which feels horrible. So I would say some people don't notice. Some people can't even tell the difference between 30 and 60. I think it's just the same thing as like if you're in a field and you pay attention and you actually know what you're looking for, anybody can notice it very easily. The difference between like 30 and 60 or an unstable 60. But I don't know. It's just kind of like, say the difference between like a film school student and just some normal person watching a movie. There's a lot of times I'll watch something like Star Wars Episode 8, for example. I thought that movie was amazing when I first watched it. And then I kept hearing everybody talk about everything that was wrong with it. I was like, oh yeah, that's totally right. Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that. Oh yeah, this totally ruins like the whole plot of the movie. It's just like some people will notice and it will bother them, like me, and some people won't, and that's fine. If it doesn't bother you, then cool. But I will say that it is an issue either way. Even if it doesn't bother you, they're targeting 60 and they're not hitting it, like hardly ever. So even if it's not a big issue for you personally, they're not hitting the target that they went for. And if you actually know what you're looking for, like any basic, it's not that hard to notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think the sentiment that Bayonetta 3 isn't unplayable is fair, though. It's not. It is very playable.
Not even close.
From what I understand and from what I've played, it's just gonna be one. So also, Brandon, you made the point that like you enjoyed something at first that you didn't notice any issues. It wasn't until people pointed them out and you went back and noticed them, right? So like this whole like frame rate discussion for Bayonetta 3 for a lot of people may not even be really relevant, right? You may play the game and whatever sort of frame drops there are may not be noticeable to you. From what I understand, the game's still the frame rate's still above 30 consistently, right? It's just the fact is that it's not consistent. Right. It rarely actually hits 60. It's like jumping between 60 and 40 all the time. Which is still always above 30, right? So it's always in terms of frames, it's always faster than 30. But there is an inconsistency that's there, and I believe many have made the argument that sometimes it's better to just be a solid, consistent 30 than an unsteady 60.
It is, because if you're constantly changing, you're noticing the change constantly. But settling for a slightly worse experience that's consistent, your brain won't notice the differences as much. So your brain is just kind of programmed to recognize things that it seems as weird or different or like little hiccups. Your brain's like programmed to notice those kind of things.
It's
more
tricky,
than
though.
just an consistent bad experience or worse experience.
It's tricky though, because while I totally agree with that, I think from a marketing perspective, when you come out and say that the third installment of a series that's been consistently aiming for 60 frames per second is now going to be 30 on more powerful hardware, it's not a good look. Right? Like, there's an expectation of the series to be a 60 frame per second series.
Like the interactive cutscene moments, or like the really, really big moments, a lot of them are capped at 30.
Right.
Like, they're not even variable. They're just straight up capped at 30.
But the
and
gameplay,
they run perfectly. Like, they don't drop.
Yeah, but the point is that the gameplay is aiming for 60, though. Yeah.
I mean, technically, those would count as sort of gameplay. Sort of.
We'll come back to this. Again, I want to kind of get to the chat. I love what we're doing, though, because we are still talking about this. It's not going according to my plan, which is totally fine, because whenever we do the podcast, we never really go according to plan. We try and fail. So, lo and behold,
plans
are for
losers. We ride by the seat of our pants.
Sure. Sure.
Not sure where that phrase comes from, but I'm sure a lot of you know it.
Yeah. I am going to move on a little bit here, though. Apparently, to Gone Hunter, for him, Bayonetta 3 is pretty smooth. So, there you go. Super Chris is saying...
the first review I watched of it didn't mention any frame rate drops. In fact, they explicitly said it ran perfectly the entire time. So, some people just don't notice, I guess.
Yeah, or for some people, it's just not that big a deal. So... Yeah. Looking here... Gone Hunter saying that for him Bayonetta 3 is pretty smooth. Peter Mickey Chu, me and her will be participating in the worldwide release of Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet video games, or both there. Well, the games are coming in a couple weeks, and that's definitely going to be a good time. I'm actually, as we get closer and closer, I'm getting a little bit more and more excited about it, even though I realize I literally yesterday was talking about my excitement being questionable.
Posted a video about how you're not.
Well, it's a nuanced opinion, and if you watch the video, I explain how I feel. It's not that I'm not excited for the games. It's just that I feel relative to how my excitement for previous Pokemon games, it's lesser. And that's still the case.
That's how I feel about Tears of the Kingdom right now.
Yeah, that's a whole other... We're going to get to that in this discussion. We're getting to that. So there's honestly like a lot I really want to get to here, but we'll come to it.
We have to mention...
Yeah. It looks like we're so behind the chat because I'm seeing people talk about the name, the weekly restart now. That's where I'm at in the chat. So, yeah.
Oh, God. That was like 20 minutes ago.
We'll trademark it. The troll button. Yeah, Red Sea Gaming. Alright, Paco Salvador. Atomy. Yeah, people are still burned out about Nintendo's new hardware conversation. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think part of it's just people don't want to hear more rumors about a Switch Pro or a Switch 2 or whatever.
It's gonna happen. It's just really a matter of when. Yeah. It's not if. Johnny Hernandez. Nintendo needs to release a more powerful Switch, or they're going to start losing some third-party support, and will not be looking for Nintendo. Their sales are declining. It's time for Nintendo. I don't
really agree with the third-party part. I don't think the third party is good right now.
It's important for Nintendo to have good timing to make this transition because they will lose momentum, and I think that's important.
Yeah. That's something they really botched up with the Wii.
And depending on how poorly things go, it could in fact impact their support. Because if the next Switch comes out at the wrong time, they lose their audience. They don't transition their current install base well. There won't be that many people playing on the new Switch, and then the old Switch will become irrelevant. And then third parties won't have much of a reason to support the system. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I just think Nintendo needs to be careful about how they transition things and make sure they maintain most of their momentum.
I think they were saying that the current Switch would like lose third-party support, which I think it already has. Like, what big third-party like games are coming out like day and date? Like that promise never.
I think
never came
in
true.
General, Switch just doesn't get day and date games, but they get games that people still want.
Even non-day and date games, people like they're not getting it. Like the big ones, like we're not seeing like Skyrims.
It's all relative, my dude.
Huge games anymore.
Persona 5, The Royal, Nier Automata. These are some high quality third party games that are coming.
Nier Automata's old. We're always going to get that kind of stuff.
Well.
And technically, so is Persona 5 Royale. I mean, it's
they are old,
very old game.
But people are still buying them. People are still happy they're coming to Switch.
I know. I'm
Switch
just saying.
Switch is getting
support. No. Hold on. Shut up and let me finish my point real quick. Because you're completely misunderstanding what I'm trying to say.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
My point is, we're always going to get that type of support, right? That type of support does well. The old games or older games that have newer versions are always going to come to Switch. Like, if a Switch 2 doesn't come out for another 5 years, we'll still get third parties like that for the next 5 years. Like, that kind of support's not going away, but the type of support we've already lost is the type of stuff like Wolfensteins and Skyrims and stuff like that. It's already gone. Like, we don't get those. Like, it's done. It's dead. Like, that dream is gone.
Someone was suggesting
the dream of having day and date releases is never going to happen. And the dream of even getting like later releases is dying.
It'd be cool.
It's already done.
Someone so I've seen some people bring up the idea of it. Like, so let's say we get Switch 2, it comes out early-ish next year, right, to launch with Zelda. What if they have some cool third parties that launch exclusively for that system, like say Elden Ring?
Ooh.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they could. I would definitely suspect, like, because the Switch came out at a time where, first of all, NVIDIA and Nintendo just started working together, so it's nothing custom, right? It's just like mostly off-the-shelf chips. So you got that making a weaker hardware, but also the innovation in the mobile space has moved so much that you can get like really close or like a really good versions game now on mobile. Like you see something like a Steam Deck which can run like full PC releases just with lower settings, like the exact same release. It's not even optimized for the system or anything. So I think we're going to see a lot more third parties actually being possible for like a longer period of time.
Especially if they shoot for a lower spec range.
The base power will be better.
Yeah. But especially if they shoot for a lower spec range and just make up for it with DLSS. Like maybe, maybe
DLSS will help a lot.
Like they shoot for like a lower resolution, like say 720p.
If we're just going off the chip that Sorry, can you say that again?
All I was saying is that like if in general developers just shoot for like say 720p, that way they can get their games running on the system, but there's still enough headroom for DLSS to kind of, push it to like 1080p levels or above, then...
Or DLSS can go from 720p to 4K.
Well, I mean, there you go. I mean, heck, maybe they could even shoot for even lower.
It's not going to look as good as like 1080p to 4K, but...
Well, yeah, but the point is that, it's gonna make things a lot easier for developers to get running on the system.
We have a lot of technologies
I don't want to. I'm sorry,
Switch to have better third parties.
I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I just feel like
that was all. That was it.
Okay, I was cutting you off.
My thought was just my thought was just that the new technology we have allows a power base that is going to actually make it conceivable for third parties to port games to a Switch 2 without actually having to go in and make a specific version with almost every single asset changed in order for it to work.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So we're just going to get more third parties in general because it'll be less optimization.
All right. Cool. All right, so I'm going to focus on ads right now so we can catch up, and then we're going to jump into the main topic for tonight. Yeah, I think I already addressed that chat there. Okay, I got a super chat here from Taker610. Thank you very much for the super chat. Brandon versus Game Over Jesse and a hair off. Who wins? I want to have Game Over Jesse on the podcast at some point. That'll be fun. That's when they get their hair off.
I said I don't know what his hair looks like. I'm sorry.
We gotta watch Game Over Jesse. He has long hair too.
I gotta watch more.
On his podcast, you can. If you've only seen his videos, you might not see his face, but if you watch his podcasts, you can see his kind of like with me. But guy you don't know, Anime next year will mark the Switch's 6th anniversary, not the 7th. So
7th year, 6th anniversary. It's kind of confusing.
Thank you for the correction. We'll be entering the 7th year because we will have completed 6 years of Switch. Yes.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Zesty Car Academy. So on Sunday, I saw a Scarlet video OLED Switch, and I bought it there and then. It went to an ATM, moved the money to my card, and bought. They only had one at my local major. I'm assuming it's some sort of store. But you got it. You got it, right?
Nice.
Did you get it?
I've been seeing like PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X's in stores sometimes.
Looks like Zesty Car got it. Good. I'm glad you got it. It looks pretty awesome.
Chip shortage is doing a lot better, which bodes well for a new Switch next year. We're seeing consoles in stores nowadays, which is nice.
Yeah, I think they're
and graphics cards too.
They're getting the job done. Super Luigi Kong. Do you think Metroid Prime 4 will be a cross-gen game with the Switch and whatever the next console is, or no? I think it's at least going to be cross-gen. It
has to come out on the base Switch, I believe. It doesn't have to. They can do whatever they want. But they should, because they said it would. So it kind of has to.
Yeah, they said it was in development. I agree that I think it's going to be available for both. Honestly, I think it's going to be... It's interesting, because I think we're seeing a lot of games now that would have benefited on the newer hardware. The best example that comes to mind is Bayonetta 3. A lot of people have kind of talked about how it really feels like this game was meant for more powerful hardware, and it's just running poorly on Switch. And that may very well be the case. It could be the case that,
they've delayed it so long. They probably know about the new hardware already. And they probably already have some of the bigger third parties like Platinum working on stuff, or at least test.
Yeah, or maybe From Software is working on an Elden Ring port.
Next year.
I'm losing you, buddy. What'd you say?
I was probably just speaking quieter. I just said maybe so.
Okay.
Discord,
You
man.
sounded like a sped up robot to me.
Sped up robot. Well, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Then.
Super Luigi Kong. With the new Mario movie coming out next year, do you think the long-rumored Donkey Kong game will finally be announced next year?
Possible.
You know, I'm really uncertain. You know, like, I would have said yes if you asked me a year ago. But at this point, just how I see things panning out, I really feel good about a Mario game coming out next year, right? Now, the thing is, why can't we get both, right? I guess part of it is that the rumor suggests that Nintendo EAD is working on it. Now, there's, like, 10 EAD groups, or EPD groups is what I think they call them now, EPD. 9 or 10, something like that.
I'm not sure.
So, but I think that initially the rumor suggested it was the same team behind Mario Odyssey. Granted, you know, it's possible they could work on more than one game at once. Maybe there's other teams involved. So I can't say with 100% certainty. And they could also be two very different games. It could be like a side-scrolling Donkey Kong game. So basically just like the spiritual successor to Donkey Kong Country. Maybe it's very Metroid Dread-like or Jungle Beat-like, where it has like a lot of like angle changes and 3D perspective changes. So it's not like just straight up 2D, which I think would be really cool. I think they should go in that direction. Yeah. But it still kind of ultimately maintains like that country gameplay. If they do that, I think that's a very different style of game that could fit in the same year as, say, a 3D Mario, right? So maybe this Donkey Kong game comes out in the summer and 3D Mario comes out in the holiday, and that's totally fine. It really just comes down to which teams are developing the games and what makes sense. Because we know that Nintendo's planning a Donkey Kong expansion for the parks. They're going to want to get Donkey Kong out there before then, because they want the awareness of the brand to be there. So, you know, I do think there's a plan for Donkey Kong. I just don't want to promise you anything because I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but I feel like within the next 2 years, we're going to see both a new Mario and a new Donkey Kong. It's just the time. It's just how where they fit them in is kind of like the tricky.
The Donkey Kong Park opening in Japan next year, or is it the year after? I think it's 2024, isn't it?
I don't remember. I forget it.
I think 2020 is next year when Orlando Park opens.
Several times, and we always forget.
I think that I don't know.
Okay.
Because if the Donkey Kong Park's coming out next year, then I think
it's set to open in 2024.
The Orlando Park's opening next year, then, right?
Yeah, it's just that's where the confusion comes in because there's multiple parks opening at different times. But according to this, the park is set to open in 2024. Of course, we see how many delays that there's been with that. Although a lot of that had to do with COVID. So you know, but if it actually is opening in 2024, I would imagine that the game comes out before or around that time. So, yeah. Within the next 2 years, I do think we see that Donkey Kong game. We got another super chat here from Taker610. Thank you very much, Taker. Is a Series S a big step over PS4 Pro and One X? I feel like with the help of DLSS, Switch 2 should be targeting capabilities similar to Series S. I don't have really a good read on that. I cannot tell you.
The Series S, I will say, the GPU term, like power, like raw horsepower, like pixel push-in power, is somewhere in between PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. So it's very last gen in that terms. But obviously it has a much, much more capable CPU, the same exact one that's in the Xbox Series X. It has ray tracing support, it has much, much faster memory, and it's built on newer architecture, which is just better in general. So it is a big upgrade, but in terms of like resolution, the games you're playing on will probably be lower or the same as like the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X. But if a Switch is never going to be as powerful as the Xbox Series S, by the way. It's not. Base power, it's not going to be that. But it could come within spitting distance, like the Steam Deck does, and with DLSS, because a lot of times, I mean, just look at the Steam Deck. We're going to get something, I believe, around that power. Somewhere around there. Maybe it'd probably be a little bit weaker, but somewhere around the Steam Deck is what I'm expecting. And which matches up with the leaks we've seen from NVIDIA too. Steam Deck pushes like medium setting to low setting PC visuals at like 720p. If Switch can do that, or get and then use DLSS to upscale, it can get very similar to an Xbox Series S or even higher resolutions than that, but similar settings. So yes, I believe they could target that with DLSS specifically, but without it, there would be no shot that they could target something like that. Ray tracing, who knows what they'll add there. The CPU, or I guess you wouldn't call it just a CPU, but the die itself does support ray tracing, like from the NVIDIA leak. That specific model, it supports it. So who knows if they'll do it or not, but we could. It's possible.
You know, I said it was gonna be a 15-minute Q&A.
I feel like the Q&A and the discussion have kind of morphed into one, which is fine.
Yeah, it is fine. Yeah. So the Zesty Academy, yeah, I got it. Mayor Supermarket, Mayor equals Dutch surname. Okay, from the founder of the company, it's a regional supermarket chain across the Great Lakes region. You have Publix in Florida. I do have Publix in Florida. That is true. Super Luigi Kong. I'm also thinking about the possibility that both the new 3D Mario and new Donkey Kong could be saved for the next console. I don't know if they'll be exclusive, but I see them being playable in that system, yes.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
I think the next Mario might launch alongside the new system and be backwards and forwards compatible.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But let's now dive into the topics. Okay. So let's for a little bit, right? Let's talk about some of the best looking games on Switch. Now, we've talked a lot about Bayonetta 3. It's hard for me to kind of like say to rank them. I don't know. This is not like a structured ranking discussion, but
no.
At some point maybe we can do that. It'll be cool. Once we see Switch 2 announced and we know what games will have come out just for Switch, we can maybe like look at every game and do like a proper ranking.
Yeah.
But for now, it's just kind of like just sort of thinking about, just different games and how they compare. Like, we're gonna talk about some games that aren't even, I wouldn't even put it on like the top 5 list, but there's certain elements about it that are kind of cool. For example, Legends Arceus, right? Like Legends Arceus is not a good looking game.
No.
By many metrics.
Not.
But there is something about it that I find to be charming. Like I think when you compare it to, say, for example,
like the Skybox.
Yeah, like it's cool, with we just seeing the lighting changes, right? And just seeing a large expansive world that is Pokemon. Like, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Seeing how many Pokemon there are in the world and being able to interact with them in different ways. Like, there are some impressive things going on in there. How you can traverse the world. There's some cool things there. Being able to jump into battle in real time with no loading screens or anything like that and then go back out. There's some cool things that Legends Arceus is doing. So even though when you play Legends Arceus, you feel like they're just like, it's kind of like when you like fly up and you see like the lakes or the mountains and it looks like it's like the same texture repeated.
Yeah, the tile texture issue they have is really bad.
It's bad.
Which does not happen. I'm not sure if you're transitioning this to Violet.
I am.
And
I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finish your transition then.
Well, I mean, but then you look at some of the things they did in Legends Arceus, right? And you compare it to Scarlet and Violet, there are advances there, which are cool. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the tiling thing. I haven't played the game myself yet.
Not barely.
But it seems like they've definitely improved on a lot of technologies that they were working on with Arceus. Now, compared to other games on Switch, the technology obviously still seems to kind of pale by comparison.
Yeah.
But relative to Pokemon games, we've seen them kind of step up bit by bit. And there are moments where Scarlet and Violet does look impressive.
Looks really good.
Like the terrorization mechanic. When we see them crystallize and we see them up close and they do their battle animations, there's tons of particle effects flying around everywhere. That looks really good.
The crystal, like the material they use for the crystal looks really good. And the materials in general for the Pokemon actually look nice. Not everything looks like just like plastic anymore. Like they actually look like they have material function. It's not like amazing, but the Pokemon look a lot more nuanced. Like some of the Pokemon that have metallic bits are a lot more shiny and look more metallic now.
Yeah, there's actual textures on the Pokemon now. Like they've actually been updating the models.
Like, react to lighting and things.
Yeah, and there's definitely some cool stuff that's happening with that. But Pokemon itself isn't like, again, it's not like the big sort of like showcase for what Switch can do. But you know, it's interesting when I think about what Switch can do, because like when the Switch initially came out, for a while I felt like Breath of the Wild was like indisputably the best looking game on Switch, which is kind of weird because, well, it also launched for Wii U.
Yeah.
And now looking back at Breath of the Wild, I still think it's a beautiful game, but there's definitely a lot of things I see there that show signs of age, right? Like, there's a lot of simple textures, right?
Yes.
And the simple textures itself aren't that bad, but I feel like when I look at like a lot of the NPCs, they seem kind of like really basic to me. I feel like they're lacking a little bit of personality because they met with a really simplistic look for a lot of characters like that. But then you also look at just like the environment itself. It's amazing. I feel like there's a lot of detail. Like, I remember playing the Great Plateau. Like, you just see all the blades of grass, you see the flowers, you see bugs jumping in and out of grass blades and from trees, and rocks moving around, and the wind. Like, there's so many little things happening all at once. It's so dense with detail and things going on. I think it's actually incredible what they were able to do.
Funny that you say it's dense with detail, because I would actually argue the greatest strength of Breath of the Wild is its lack of detail in general. But I see what you mean. Like, in terms of like the amount of objects they're placing, like there's a lot of individual blades of grass. There's little rocks and different things that
and they're all interacting with each other. In terms of those like the details, physics in the game, I think are impressive.
The game feels very lifelike because everything flows together in a very natural, physically based way. Yeah. So, but I would say, like, if you look at the specific things, like the texture on a rock, usually it's extremely simple. Like, basically mostly colors and shades. Like, it's very, very, very few, like, fine details in the textures, or like, God, there was a word I wanted to use that just slipped my mind. High frequency. There's a very, very little high frequency detail in Breath of the Wild. A lot of it's just mainly colors. And I feel like that's something that Legends Arceus could do, or not Legends Arceus, the new one, Violet and Scarlet and Violet. Besides the fact that the texture resolution is generally worse than Breath of the Wild, it also goes for more detailed textures a lot of times, but not in a tasteful way. It's kind of like, in Arceus we had more detailed textures, but they repeated. In Violet, we have more detailed textures, but they're just absolutely so low resolution that it just looks bad. I think Breath of the Wild has this very polished look, and the art of Breath of the Wild is absolutely amazing. You can tell they worked like 6 years on that game, because the art style is just absolutely perfectly realized. And they make sure to go in and make every asset, even if it's not the most detailed like ever. Like, the blades of grass are like one color. They're like one color little things that pop out of the ground. But they look amazing. I don't know. They just look great. And the way they interact with the lighting looks good. It's a very simple, but it flows. You don't see like those low resolution, chunky texture artifacts and things like you do in other games that have even similar resolution textures, but try to go for something much more high frequency detail.
Yeah.
So,
you know, though, if the things I would like to see be improved upon in Tears of the Kingdom, which I kind of doubt they'll be able to do, but at least not on the current Switch, is one, I want to see more, I guess, what did you call it, like high frequency tech. Like, I want to see more, like, more high detail textures. Something about Breath of the Wild, while, you know, we've talked about it, I think it does the best job compared to pretty much any other game I can think of feeling like a living, breathing world that you can interact with in so many ways. Like, that's something that Breath of the Wild does better than pretty much any game in existence. Yeah.
Pretty much.
But that's one of the reasons why it's so special. But like, there are things that I wish were better, like, again, the textures, but also when you look out into the distance, like, there's kind of like this sense of like gray in the background. Like, there seems almost like it to be like almost like a gray filter, if you know what I mean. Like, there's, I guess they kind of use like a faded fog to sort of hide.
I mean, they do this in Xenoblade 3 a lot more often. I kind of know what you mean, where they like just fade out detail to gray. I mean, honestly, that is something that another thing that Breath of the Wild does really well is it hides its faults. if you look up Pokemon Legends Arceus, you look out, there's not really anything hiding the fact that there's just like nothing rendered and the textures are like barely loaded and like nothing's really there. In Breath of the Wild, they have like a lot of fog and other effects and post-processing effects, and that gray effect, I'm not sure what that is exactly, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they even did that back, even as far as like the N64, they were doing kind of techniques like that. But this is obviously a much more quality version of that effect. But you can't just like throw it, like you need these kind of effects to make the game look good at range, because obviously you can't render out very far, especially not on Switch. So I think that's actually a very good thing that Breath of the Wild does over other games like Legends Arceus.
I guess something that I would like to see improved is just kind of like there are certain things that just seem plain, right? Like a lot of the stones, right? Or like just buildings. Like I would like those things to kind of stand out a little bit more, feel a bit more vibrant. They definitely have to change, and something that I pointed out in the original 2019 teaser trailer is their indoor lighting is terrible. Like for caves and stuff. Like you go in a cave in Breath of the Wild, and it's just everything looks lit. There's also
like, there's no shadows on anything.
There's not really any caves in Breath of the Wild, though. Like they're very.
There are some.
It's like very little. Like there's the one that you go into for the shrine with the Leviathan bones.
Yeah, there's a couple in the Hebra Mountains.
A couple holes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not very big, but they're caves. Like they're big enough to be called caves. I mean, they're huge caverns. They're not like extensive places you can explore, but they're big.
Put it this way: there's more caves in Twilight Princess.
Okay, fair, but Twilight Princess caves are very narrow. The point is, the sequel should have a lot more like we're thinking it's gonna have more underground stuff. I mean, in the very first trailer, there's underground cavern system that actually looks lit. I'm not disagreeing with what
you're saying. I'm just complaining that there's not a lot of caves. Like I remember playing Breath of the Wild. I was like, man, I really want to find a cave. Oh, it's
dude. I felt the same thing. I thought there was gonna be like a whole. I remember back in 2014 thinking that we were just gonna stumble across these huge like dungeons that are like integrated into the world.
Right, and not really.
Maybe in Tears of the Kingdom.
And that's something I want to see in Tears of the Kingdom, because like the theory is that the temples are in the ground, they're in the earth, and they're being exposed in some way, and that's how we're gonna go into the ancient temples that go way beyond the history of Breath of the Wild, and that's where we're gonna find powers that will be needed to help us with whatever is needed in Tears of the Kingdom, which would mean that there's a lot more integration with this stuff. I hope we see that for sure.
To go back to my original point, though. Tears of the Kingdom will probably have a lot more caves, and they really need to fix the lighting system for indoor areas, for large indoor areas like that, because unless you go to a shrine, which is a bespoke area that loads on its own and has its own like lighting information, any kind of like cave-like area in Breath of the Wild just looks horribly unlit, which is not how it looks in the trailer. So, who knows?
Who knows? But like, is there like a particular game that you want to bring up that for you it just kind of shows off like some of the strengths of the Switch? Like, what is the showcase game for the Nintendo Switch?
The showcase game. If we want to go more recent third-party one, I would say Xenoblade 3 is an absolutely amazing showcase for Switch. Not only because
you said third party.
I said not third party.
Oh, okay. Well, now I'm just clarifying then. First party, Nintendo.
First party.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3, made by Monolith Soft, a 100% wholly owned Nintendo developer, totally in-house.
I'd like to clarify, I meant to say, at the very least, not third party.
In other words,
but the
first party.
First party, yes.
Nintendo developed.
Yes. But that is.
I was only stressing that because there's a lot of people who get confused about Xenoblade.
Oh yeah. True. But that is one of the most impressive games, not just because of what it looks, but the features that it's actually doing. Like the way it's actually pulling off its image reconstruction for Switch is insane. Like that's actually a really, really big feature that is going to be super important going on for Switch in general. Not for the original Switch, maybe. I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from this technique, but this is just a technique that's used all the time on like other platforms. So to see it actually used on Switch and it having such a good result is big. Because that game does not look like it's running sub 720p in dock mode. It looks like it's running at like 900p to 1080p most of the time. Like it looks really good. And even above that, like the game, I would say in terms of its art, it does not flow as good to the eye as like Breath of the Wild does, but it is a much more technically demanding game and like more technically impressive than Breath of the Wild. Oh, which is obviously why it has to run at such low resolutions. But you can see, like, sometimes, dude, I get so impressed with just how high resolution the textures are for most of the places. Obviously, it's a very, very big world, so there's going to be some areas going like, that's areas. Like, that game has really high resolution textures that hold up, like, to close detail. And it has, like, really impressive lighting. It's got that really nice screen space shadows that they've been using ever since 2. That game looks impressive in every single way. Like that game, like pushed to 4K on a Switch 2 would look absolutely mind blowing. But even as it does, like now, it looks good. Like it looks like I said, like a 900p to 1080p game, and it's a dynamic 720p one. So
it looks. I think the game looks sharp in a lot of cases. Sometimes it looks a little fuzzy, but I mean, yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes you notice certain effects run at lower resolutions. So I noticed like Keva's castle has this like glow effect, which is like completely unfiltered. So it just has raw aliasing all over it, which is really weird because the game uses
TAA. How far are you in the game, by the way?
45 hours, I think.
That doesn't tell me much.
I'm right before chapter 6. I'm in the middle of chapter 5.
Have you found... Okay, so I don't think you're at the snow area.
I have found it. The city.
The city?
If that's what you're referring to.
No, I'm referring to something else. It's like on the other side of the world.
I'm in a big ocean.
Okay. Yeah, you're getting there, but you're not there yet. No, there's just a castle. Or I should say structure.
Agnes Castle, I guess?
There's a structure in the game that's like late game where there's literally only one person that stays there, but like it's impressive visually. Like it's a looker. It might be my favorite like structure.
The game in general just looks really good.
Yeah.
And it holds up in fine details like most of the time. I would say there's occasional times where you're like, why are you zooming on this really low resolution asset for this cutscene? I don't understand why it looks this bad. But most of the time, like, they zoom in on things and they just look good. Like,
yeah.
Even just like basic ground textures that they have stretched out in these huge fields look good and detailed. Like they have that high frequency detail, but they also have the resolution to back it up. So it looks really good.
You want to know what's a game that I think looks really good on Switch that maybe a lot of people wouldn't even mention in a graphics discussion? Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
Yeah.
Kirby and the Forgotten Land looks really freaking good. And part of the reason why it looks so good is because it lives within its constraints, right? And that's actually probably an issue that Bayonetta 3 has. Bayonetta 3, and we actually heard that initially they actually wanted to make this more of an open world game, and then they had to scale things back.
Bayonetta 4 is going to be something crazy, I bet.
I speculate if there is a Bayonetta 4. We'll see. Hopefully sales are strong. But I speculate that Bayonetta 3, they probably were hoping there was going to be new hardware by this point. And it didn't pan out. Keep in mind, this game's been in development since at least 2017. So it's had a long development cycle. So Platinum Games is definitely within the know of what's coming up next for Nintendo hardware, especially if it's coming out next year. So, you know, I mean, considering the NVIDIA leak and all the rumors, like, there's definitely been that talk. I mean, we've heard a lot of reports that a lot of developers have some knowledge of new hardware, right? Or even dev kits.
Even for the initial Switch, like, Nintendo went to developers and was like, hey, do these specs look good enough to you? And I forget who it was. I think Capcom was the one who told them that they needed at least 4 gigabytes of RAM.
More RAM. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, the point is that games like Bayonetta 3 seem like they were almost made for more powerful hardware in mind. because they had this vision and they kind of had to kind of make things work for just the Switch, even though they
Right.
had a more ambitious vision. Then you take something like Kirby and the Forgotten Land. First time Kirby's had an actual 3D game, but it's not an open world adventure. It's not even like like a 3D game like say Super Mario Odyssey. It's more of something akin to a 3D world, right? So but by doing that, right, it has a limited camera angles, but you can still move around the camera. You can still use it to enjoy the world, explore around in a 3D environment. But by doing this, they can kind of focus on more relatively small areas, but there's still a lot to explore. And the visuals within these relatively contained areas are pretty detailed. There's a lot kind of going on there. There's a lot of vibrance and strong contrast. There's that high
frequency detail.
High frequency detail with the textures. The lighting's insane.
Great material work.
Yeah.
There's this area where they have like these toys running. I didn't get to play the game yet. I really want to.
Oh, you got to.
But in the trailer, you see this area where you're like running through this like dark area, and these like toys are popping up. Anyways, there's like this plastic material, and there's this carpet material. There's like all these different types of materials, like metal and different things, and they all look really good and convincing.
Yeah.
But that game targets 30 FPS as well,
which is a solid frame rate.
Another reason why it looks like that.
And experienced. I just realized, man, it's funny kind of looking at my Twitter at some games that like, oh, this game looks sick, and then just thinking about it in memory. I'm gonna pull up some screenshots here for you for some games that we're talking about that I pulled for my Switch that just look amazing.
I'll have to go on to the actual stream to see that.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up some screenshots here in a moment. Just some things I shared on Twitter in the last few months. And I just think they kind of show off some pretty good looking stuff. Just give me a moment here because I'm looking for something that I'm pretty sure I posted for Kirby. Let's see. I played Kirby before I got Ruby. By the way, I think Having Hope asked me about Ruby. She's doing fine. She's outside the room right now, but she's fine. Okay, I found the image I was looking for. All right, so let me show you guys just some screenshots that I thought looked really good. Okay. Let's see here. I forgot how to share screenshots. Let's see. I had a share option.
You'll figure it out one day.
One day. I don't know when that day will be. What is scene 2? Scene 2 is nothing. It's not that one either. Oh, this is it. What? That's wrong. Hold on. Hold on. There's my cat. That's my cat. She's really pretty game. Okay. I'm done with my cat for now. I have actual screenshots to show you. So we were talking about Xenoblade earlier. Okay, they're not mine. Anyways. They're cool though, right? Anyway, so like this is just like a shot I took of me playing Xenoblade 3, and it looks amazing, right? Like, yeah, like it's just crazy how good it looks. I'm now like thinking on it, like, why I think this game look worse? Like, I don't know. This is a 720p screenshot, by the way, because this is just like a screen capture from the Switch, and it still looks really good. Like there's impressive shots like this in the world, and I'm at a really high up place in that it's kind of a little hard to find. But then going back to Kirby, right? I brought up Kirby earlier before we tangented 7 times. But like you look at Kirby here, right? You look at the lighting. You see the ice there in the background, and just the kind of detail it has. The flames. Right, it's exactly like everything here is super detailed, and the way they're able to accomplish this is because it is a relatively small world that they're actually putting together here, because it's not an open world game. Wow. Hmm. It would be interesting to see if like maybe one of the requests that Nintendo had with Nvidia is to produce something that is better for making open world games. Can you guys not hear? Apparently they can't hear the stream. Can you guys hear me? Ooh. For some reason, Brandon, you can't be heard.
What? I've been silenced. The Nintendo
Yeah.
goons are after me.
Can you guys hear me?
They don't want everybody to know the Switch's
Whoa.
restraints on open world titles.
I apologize, guys. Okay, let me see if I can fix that. I don't know why it just changed randomly. I didn't do anything to change it. It just kind of you stopped working.
Out there.
Can you guys hear him now? I think they should.
Can you hear me?
Now.
Testing. Hello. Am I here?
I don't know why they cut you off, but continue your point though, because you were talking. Basically, Brandon was talking about how it was very, very astute of me to bring up that Kirby and Forgotten Land is produced in a small world, right? Which allows it to create some really cool effects because they're not trying to. They're focusing on a small area. But you were talking about that with Switch, the way it's designed, it's not actually catered for open world games. Go ahead.
Very true.
I'm gonna let him make it.
Because of the Switch's poor CPU performance, and because the RAM, you only got 4 gigabytes, and the transfer speed, which is important because when you're playing an open world game, right, there's no loading screens. Normally, when you load into a new area in the game, you load all the new assets in a loading screen. However, if you're moving from a desert to a mountain in Breath of the Wild, there is no loading screen there. However, they're completely different assets, which cannot be all loaded at once. So you need that transfer speed to get the memory moved to where you want. And if it's too slow, that's not going to happen. And the Switch has slow memory and not much of it. And the CPU also has to take into account the fact that it has to order the memory around everywhere it needs to go. And the Switch doesn't have a very fast CPU either. So all those effects combined mean that overall the Switch is actually pretty poor, specifically at open world games. However, it does have the GPU grunt. The GPU itself is not the issue. It's the RAM, the transfer speed of the RAM, and the CPU.
Okay. I'm still trying to get over that there was just...
all of which have had the biggest innovations, which is the exciting part. Every single one of those have had bigger innovations in the mobile space than GPU. GPU is actually the slowest growth in the mobile space, which is funny because GPU has the fastest growth in the desktop space compared to CPU. So, yeah.
Interesting.
But luckily for us, all of these stuff in a Switch 2 would be way better. Like, some of this stuff, like 10 times boost into some of this stuff, so...
Yeah.
Or more.
Stuff that would allow things like Bayonetta 3 to actually have been an open world game.
Yeah.
Or semi-open world, right? Or things that would allow Breath of the Wild to have less fog in the background and perhaps more high-frequency textures.
Right. But that is something I want to touch on while we're talking about graphics in a new Switch. It's not even just about like the games looking better. Like, there are fundamental reasons why a lot of third-party games can't come to Switch, and it's not just because they have to lower the textures and stuff, it's just because the world design cannot run on a CPU that limited. And having a new Switch would actually mean that new types of game experiences, not just new graphical features and whatnot, which I'm always excited about as well, but new actual like gameplay features and mechanics and bigger worlds that have new, like, more enemy types and like more things happening are possible, which would not ever be able to run good enough on the original Switch. So it's not just better looking games, but it's also better, more quality, more crazy experiences.
So
The word is
whenever
not
I
coming to
hear
mind, but you know what I
about
mean.
games coming to Switch or less powerful hardware, visuals are important, and I always get upset like, oh, they have to take these textures out or whatever. That's one
Mhm.
thing. But when I hear about them, say, taking out the amount of enemies on screen, that's where I'm like, okay, that's literally impacting gameplay.
Right.
And,
And then we
and
have other
that's
things
that.
like No Man's Sky is a good one. That game looks really good for Switch. I know like Digital Foundry didn't have as high opinion of it. I think they're kind of so focused on like the high end that sometimes the Switch stuff they kind of are a little
It also
harsher than
depends
I
on
am
who's
on.
looking at it, right? Because some of them have more of an appreciation of weaker hardware pulling things off, while others are like, yeah.
But yeah, that game doesn't have big like gameplay elements like the multiplayer, and also like I think some of the types of bases that can be in the game. There's like certain base areas. I've never played it, so I don't know. But there's like these civilizations that you can find apparently that aren't in the game. There's gameplay stuff that's just not in there because it won't run. So that's the point.
Okay. Let's see here. There's another game that I think needs to be brought up before we move on to our next topic. I mean, there's honestly a few games there's a lot of games that we could talk about.
I mean, there's a lot of games that come to mind. Like Astral Chain is a great third-party one. If you want to talk some good third parties. The other one that came to my mind immediately after saying that was Luigi's Mansion 3, which might be like one of the best-looking Switch games that comes out.
Luigi's Mansion 3.
Absolutely insane how good that game looks.
It sounds like I'm joking, but I'm being serious. Like, that game is crazy.
That game blew me away, bro. And it's because
it's dense with detail and things going on within a small space.
Small space and very the big thing is they limit your camera angles. So a lot of things behind you aren't actually rendered at all. Like they're just not there. So they only really have to render the detail in front of the camera and like in that specific viewpoint. So that does help, but it allows them to pull off detail that frankly does not look like it should be possible on Switch. Like that game looks insane, and it also gives me it depends. Like Metroid Prime 4, I'm hopeful because obviously the GameCube games look so good because they're those they only have to load one room at a time pretty much, and just like they load like 2 zones at a time I think in GameCube. But yeah, they only have to load so much at a time. They can really pump up the detail. And even though the Switch is a lot more capable than the GameCube, it has a lot of similar constraints, actually, funnily enough. Like just low RAM, poor CPU, things like that, that consoles had back then. The Switch has that. So if Metroid Prime 4 is designed in a way where it can take advantage of that, we might also see a very good game come out of that. But I think
Prime 4,
something I'm
if
realizing,
they don't go for open world, they could definitely make something that's more like a Luigi's Mansion, Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Not cartoony in that sense, but like something that's very dense with detail and some very advanced texture work, where we see materials. Great lighting. I think it would be really cool to like see environments that have a lot of geometry, right? Like a lot of pipes and there's like lighting that goes in and out, like things like that I think could look really good if they sort of develop with the Switch in mind. Now, it's not that I don't like big open areas, but I do freaking love them. Xenoblade's amazing for that, right? But it just kind of comes down to what that game is for. Not every game needs to be a big open world game. Metroid doesn't have to be. I think there could be areas that are big-ish, but not like giant expanses where you're walking for 10 minutes at a time. Like you think about if you've played Metroid Prime or any of the Metroid Prime games, they'll have big rooms, right? Like the rooms are so big, at least within the context of the game, you don't think of it as a room per se. It's more like a hub area that leads to different areas, to different tunnels and sections. Like they could maybe expand on that a bit, right? So there could still be some areas that have some scope, right? Or like I think about the second area in Metroid Prime 3, because you first start off is it called the Valhalla? In Prime 3 you start off on a ship in space and there's a battle, but then it leads to a base on a planet. And there are parts of that base that are outside. You can see kind of like the planet around. You can see sort of things happening in the background. Now, they aren't things you can access per se, but you can kind of see them. There could be moments like that. So you can still have these moments where you have pretty vistas and things of that nature. It's not like there can't be pretty vistas. Like even Kirby and the Forgotten Land had tons of pretty vistas. You just didn't explore all of it, right? So, you know, I think there's definitely a way to construct Prime 4 where it can still run and look amazing on Switch. It just has to be maybe made more like Luigi's Mansion and Kirby the Forgotten Land.
Yeah, it's something like that. I'm just like thinking like all like the best looking games on Switch are like a lot of them are smaller, more constrained titles. And I think it's just smart to do that when you're working with the Switch, because it's just you're never gonna get something like The Witcher 3 to be as good looking as you want on Switch, or something like No Man's Skies where you have to generate all of this data all the time. But if you have smaller scale experiences and you go with the scope, you can make something really great. I think the other thing is also using effects. I think Nintendo is very smart with the effects they use. They don't always adopt like new effects just because they exist. So a lot of times a lower quality version of a new effect looks way worse than a high quality version of a lower quality effect.
Yeah.
So like if you use something, let's just say something simple like reflections. There's two basic ways you can do reflections. You can do things like a cube map, which is like a texture that you just project under the surface, or you can do something like screen space reflections, which tries to like extrapolate data from the screen. The screen space is obviously going to look better eventually, but it's going to look worse if you run at a low resolution. Or if you have, actually I thought of something better. Something that the plebeians, even you unknowing, we should be able to understand this. If you use something like a volumetric effect, like fog, if you use an actual effect that's very low resolution, every time you look at the fog, which takes up a lot of the screen, it's going to look very low resolution the entire time. In fact, you can see this in Xenoblade 3. I mentioned it earlier. In front of Kevis Castle. If you have Xenoblade 3 and you are up to this point, go to Kevis Castle and just look at the big blue rings around it. They're a very low resolution effect they use that has a lot of aliasing on it. And there's other effects like this that Nintendo just doesn't use. Like they use a lot of just older effects that are higher quality. They look very clean. They're simple, yes, but they're clean. Like having clean, nicely done artwork is a lot better than having like high frequency, high detail textures that are like really repetitive, like you see in Legends Arceus. I'm
sure there's exceptions to this.
Or really low resolution, as in Scarlet and Violet.
I'm sure there's exceptions to this, right? But I feel like as a general sort of rule, or just observation, it feels like that the reason we see scenarios like that is because with Nintendo, they tend to take their time with games, and they usually work with weaker hardware, and also sometimes they're slow on the uptake with new things oftentimes. But because they take their time, they will do what it takes to make something look and play right, and they're more, they won't always do the fastest way. They won't always make something the fastest way possible, and it'll amount to some games that look better, but they'll be using perhaps not as advanced graphical features or techniques. And then sometimes you'll see other developers, I'm not stating anyone in particular, sometimes developers aren't even as big, but they may rely on some of these like feature sets or techniques because they're more generalized, and they can kind of like, oh, we need lighting, let's input that system. And it's not necessarily catered for that particular moment in their game. Or
like third-party ports that were built for other systems that need to be ported by like Panic Button or something to the Switch. Obviously, they're not going to go in and replace every single system with a different.
They're not going to rebuild the game from.
They're not going to rebuild the game.
Yeah.
But it's going to look worse using those higher quality assets at a lower resolution. I mean, like, look, Doom 2016 is a more technically demanding game running on Switch than Breath of the Wild, but which one looks better?
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild, obviously. I don't think anybody would look at the two games and say that Breath of the Wild doesn't look better. But which one is actually more technically impressive? Doom 2016 by a long shot. But that's just how it is. It's not about how technically impressive it is, it's that it doesn't actually look good.
Right. The end result is like what's more appealing to the eye.
Yeah.
And Breath of the Wild does a great job with that. And that's why Breath of the Wild, I would still say is one of the best looking games on Switch, even though it was initially made for Wii U and it's a launch title.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when we talk about open world games, there's not really another game that surpasses Breath of the Wild in terms of how good it looks on Switch.
Let's say Xenoblade 3 does.
It's not technically it's not open world.
Yeah, true.
But
I mean, yeah.
I mean, there's also not that many open world.
There's
games
not really
on Switch.
any other open world games on Switch by that definition, really. I mean, maybe there are, but
Starlink.
Come to mind.
I actually think Starlink looks really good for Switch.
Starlink.
Starlink looks really good.
Well, I guess then No Man's Sky as well.
Yeah, those are pretty games, but they also are not like realistic looking games. They're more cartoony.
No.
So they can make do with simpler textures, which it's easier to get those games to run well.
Yeah.
So that
there's a reason
helps.
Nintendo stylizes their games.
Isn't Witcher open world? I haven't played it.
It is. The Witcher is open world.
I thought about picking it up.
There's still, I believe, The Witcher 3 still has separate maps for some things.
Sure.
Like,
apparently Pokemon has
I
separate
would
maps
still
too for some of the towns. It's open world, but there are certain towns that like load in as their own areas.
For what?
In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, even though most of the world is open, there are certain bigger towns that when you go into them, they load in as their own areas, which I'm fine with. I think that's okay. There's still a lot of towns that fit within the open world, though, right? Not every town is like that. Some towns are just within it.
I imagine that
like the
they
big
just
one,
couldn't
I bet.
I imagine they have a separate RAM budget for the open world areas and the indoor areas. As I've also noticed in the trailers, all like those cities that you load into all have like way higher resolution textures than the cities you just walk into.
Well, I noticed another game that looks really good on Switch, and it's a very contained game, which is how it pulls it off. Metroid Dread.
Yes, that game looks fantastic, especially on OLED, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I played it mostly on TV, but
I've been literally waiting to play it because I want to buy an OLED.
Oh my gosh, the game is beautiful.
Those perfect blacks, bro. With how much black is in that game, I want to have those.
I played it on
blacks,
an OLED in my house. But anyway, yeah, it's an incredible game. But it's one of those. I feel like Metroid Dread, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Luigi's Mansion 3. These are some of the best looking games on Switch, but they're not like super open, ambitious games. But Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is, and it looks really good. I just show off a screenshot. I'm like, damn, I didn't remember the game looked that amazing. I just played like a month ago.
I think that game gets away with it because, like, keep in mind, even in docked mode, that game often drops down to 540p. Like, if they didn't have their frame generation upscale, well, not generation, frame upscale, TAA, whatever you want to call it, that magic stuff that they have to upscale their image, it would look horrible. Like, it would look blurrier than Xenoblade 2 does. Like, it would look bad. But they're smart, and they use this feature, and I hope that's what we're seeing. I'm 99% confident that feature is in Breath of the Wild. Because all the Tears of the Kingdom videos have had perfect anti-aliasing. And the original Breath of the Wild didn't have any.
Okay. Another game, there's a couple other games I want to mention before we move on. Super Mario Odyssey.
Ooh, that's
Super Mario Odyssey, open sandbox areas, large worlds. Not open world, but large worlds you explore. Mm-hmm. All the textures are clean. There's detail. The world is interactive. They're very colorful. But the cool thing about Mario Odyssey is that you would think, oh, okay, it's able to produce stunning visuals by being very cartoony. But, the funny thing about Mario Odyssey, it's not always cartoony. It puts in realistic textures and characters and environments sometimes within a cartoony world. Like, it's kind of a blend. And, I mean, I think it works.
I'd say they're more detailed. I wouldn't say they're realistic.
Semi-realistic.
But they're definitely a lot more detailed than, say, like 3D World or something. Or Galaxy.
And it pulls it off.
But yeah.
And the game runs at 60 frames per second.
Barely ever drops.
Mario Odyssey. I mean, you could even make the Mario Odyssey might be the most impressive game on Switch from a visual perspective because it's got large areas, lots of high frequency detail textures. The world's very interactive. It does a lot of things really well.
The world you go to, I think most of the worlds hold up very well. I think the world that holds up. Actually, I was gonna say the one that holds up the worst is definitely New Donk City. It goes for the most realistic look and the most high detailed look, and there are some areas you can see that are like very repetitive textures or like very low resolution, and also that area in particular has a lot of straight lines. So the aliasing in that area is absolutely horrific. There's just aliasing everywhere. The entire image looks like way low resolution than the rest of the game.
I just don't care. But I think
like aliasing is a huge issue for me because it's like frame drops in that it's tiny but you notice it, but it's all over the screen. Like the entire screen is crawling with artifacts. It might be the case because
I play so much Nintendo games that I think my brain just like, oh, okay, that's a Nintendo thing.
Dude, the first thing I noticed actually when we got a PS4, my dad got one. I was like, man, the games look so clear. And I'd be like, this game is running at 1080p on my Wii U. And this game is running on 1080p on PS4. But it looks so clear and not low resolution on my PS4. It's because the PS4 had anti-aliasing.
Yeah.
Like, even before I was into graphics, like, that's back, like, little, like, 15-year-old, 13-year-old me had nothing, didn't even know what anti-aliasing was. Didn't know what resolution even really meant.
You could see it. You could see a difference
there. Yeah, I could
there.
see it. It was obvious.
I want to defend my point about New Donk City, though. I understand where you're coming from. It's hard for me to think of exact examples, but I do remember there being like fuzzy moments, like because of the aliasing. I understand that. But like one of the cool things about New Donk City is you can climb up the buildings and then jump all the way down.
That's super fun,
right? Or like, you know how when you start New Donk City, you're like on a smaller building and there's like a bit of an expanse, and you have to take like the wire to get across. But like with the mechanics of the game, you could find a way to actually jump across. And the fact that you're able to do that, and the loading really all holds up, and it's just all still there, that's awesome to see that the world all holds up in that way.
It's impressive because it's smart, because they have these big open areas, but they're also very constrained. Like, if you look outside of the areas, like the levels themselves, a lot of times the further detail isn't that good. Like, take New Donk City, for example. Like, you look outside the city, it's very, like, very basic. I don't remember if they're exactly how it looks. I just remember it looking extremely basic. It's been a while since I played Mario Odyssey.
It's just, they did such a great job with Mario Odyssey because the world, there's so many little things you can interact with, like Mushroom Kingdom, for example. You can just run around, play with the mushrooms and the grass, and there's so much cool things there.
I will say, the Mushroom Kingdom is, that actually is the worst looking kingdom by far.
Every kingdom I bring up is the worst looking kingdom.
Yeah, they're all the worst. No, I will actually say that the Mushroom Kingdom, I think, in a lot of ways, looks bad. Like, it looks unfinished. Like, it doesn't even just look like Switch couldn't do it. It looks like they didn't finish the graphics on a lot of it. Like, there's just big, plain, very not artistically good-looking grass texture everywhere. Like, no actual 3D grass or anything. Like, a lot of the textures, I think, look unpleasant. I don't think that part of the game looks good. You want to know
what I think is unpleasant? You.
Oh. I think that is one of my favorite worlds because of the nostalgia, but it is an ugly world. Like, a lot of the parts, I will straight up say, there are parts of the Mushroom Kingdom world that look straight up ugly. Like, bad. Like, it's not even just like, oh, that's not as good as... No. A New Donk just doesn't look as good as the other parts of the game. There are parts of the Mushroom Kingdom, I think, from an artistic perspective, not a technical perspective, an artistic perspective, do not look good.
I think
the art team fucked up that part.
Visually, the kingdom that looks the worst to me is actually Lake Kingdom. Just because I just don't think it's not really doing much, right? Everything else
It
I
is
feel like
much
there's a
more
lot of...
simple, but are you talking about which one?
Not
There's two.
Seaside
There's two
Kingdom,
under
not the
one.
one with the beach and the giant like water
Right,
expanse you can
right.
explore underwater. I mean the one where there's like the... I don't know what they're like the feminine like...
That one looks absolutely good. That's beautiful though.
You're
Like I love
wrong.
that one. No, nothing about that technically or artistically looks worse than the rest of the game. Maybe it looks more plain.
It's
I
more
guess?
plain.
It's not plain though. It's like sparkly and colorful. And what are you talking? Plain?
You're plain.
I would not call that part
You're plain.
You're plain.
You're plain.
I don't think there's a single part of Mario Odyssey.
I mean, there's no kingdom that I think is ugly.
That I can call plain.
And I just feel
the
like
Mushroom Kingdom.
Compared to all the other kingdoms, it's the one that seems the most subdued to me. That's all. I'm gonna look up an image from it and then change my mind.
I remember it being like super colorful though.
Oh, this is art. That doesn't count. It is.
I remember
colorful.
It being like really.
No,
pretty.
it is colorful, but like when you, I mean, it's it looks okay.
I think the beginning area looks kind of simple, but then you go out and like through the cave to that other like bigger area. A little more interesting.
Yeah.
It's a very small kingdom though. Very contained.
Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with my setup here. Normally it's not like this, but whatever. I know this is, but like this is Lake Kingdom. You know, like it looks okay. That's art. This is not Lake Kingdom. This is Seaside Kingdom, and it's a blurry image. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's not ugly. I just think it's kind of... I don't know, there's just not like a lot going on in it. As opposed to, say, Seaside Kingdom, which is... Like, Seaside Kingdom is crazy. I'm just looking at images of Seaside Kingdom, and I just feel like it destroys Lake Kingdom. Like, there's just such a... It's such a vast improvement. It's just mind-boggling. Alright, let's we can agree on something.
I mean, you see like the sparkles off the sand, the water.
And there's another kingdom that I want to mention. I mean, there's honestly there's the Cloud Kingdom, which there's not much there, but like just seeing the clouds is really cool.
But the clouds were like beautiful though. Like I remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how that area looked. I remember it was at like sunset or something maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
I remember something about the lighting was really good for that area.
No, it was. I'm like looking up images now. It's just like really pretty. It's also very basic. But yeah, no, it's
something overall in the discussion that I've been pointing out, but I want to like make sure people like realize this is I think the type of games we see on Switch 2 will be a lot more varied, I think, in terms of what we're getting from like third parties and stuff, and even from Nintendo. I think there was a lot of design decisions, games that could have been open world that were like Nintendo open worlds other than like Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade. Like, that's all they really have.
Yeah, I wish there was more worlds we can. I mean, happily got Xenoblade, right? It would have been cool if Bayonetta was open, I guess, but I mean, it's not really what the series is known for, so you know. It's also one of the reasons I was happy about Kirby, because while it's not like an open world, you know, it is like a 3D adventure game, right, or action platformer. But you know, there's a level of adventure there. Mario Odyssey, you know, they're not straight up open worlds, but there's exploration to be had. Is my point. And I think it's I want games like that. Those are kind of games I sort of fell in love with back on the N64, like Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time. But there were other games back then that were like that too, like Banjo-Kazooie, right? Like just these games that like, oh, there's these worlds and I can like move around a lot and explore them, right? It's like a lot of games you can't really do that anymore, on Nintendo at least, just because they don't always go for that. And the thing is, they shouldn't always go for that because there's different types of games, like for example, a racing game should stay a racing game. Although I have made the argument maybe Mario Kart would benefit by having even larger maps, with more branching paths. But I would like to see like another game that has like a large world to explore. You know what would be cool? If they resurrected the Earthbound series and maybe remade them in 3D, right? Like I'm not even asking for new stories because I know that the original creator doesn't want to go beyond the 3. But what if you were to just revisit each one and retell them, with new gameplay changes and modernizations in a 3 and make it an open, maybe not open world, but like a large scale 3D RPG adventure. Like how cool would that be?
That would be cool.
I mean, and I'm not asking for like, you basically just kind of like, you make the towns that you explore in Earthbound and then you just connect them. Like
just connect the dots.
Well, because the thing is, at least with Earthbound, when you play it, like you're exploring a town, there might be a few side areas you go kind of back and forward with, but it's like a biggish area that you kind of explore, right? And then you move on to the next one. Like that could be it, and that would be super cool. Like imagine just a fully realized 3D town that has like a back lake area and a cave area that you can kind of go and explore, and there's like a story, and you're interacting with different characters and figuring out what's going on, Like, that's cool. So, I would love to see that, Like, think about what they did with the Onet stage or Onet stage I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Is it Onet or Onet? You know what I'm talking about, right? I thought it was just
On It. I thought it was pronounced On It.
But the thing is,
it's the first town. It's
just the towns are based off numbers. That's why.
I'm not sure if it's pronounced as one because it's like two. Is it Tucson? What's the second town? It is pronounced two though. Like for the second one, I forget what it is.
I forget what it is too.
Like Tucson or something.
Yeah.
But I don't think. I've always heard it pronounced On It, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of like different experiences that could be allowed on the Switch 2 with like better hardware, and I'm thinking of like.
So the towns are Onet, Tucson, 3 to 4 side. They stopped doing the numbers after that apparently.
It is Tucson. Yeah. The 3, 4 side. Yeah, like most of them are pronounced like straight up like 1, 2, 3, like 2, 3, 4. So I imagine Onet it'd be Onet, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like experience.
Now the Pokemon games are going for the more openish adventure, right? Like you're asking for like Nintendo games that have more of like Scarlet and Violet's going open world.
But you can see exactly where they're struggling.
Hey man, like what's cool about Scarlet and Violet though, and even with Legends Arceus, like you can pretty much everywhere within the grid, you can explore. Like you can climb up to the top of the mountain, you can get to every nook and cranny. And the same is going to happen for Scarlet and Violet, and it's running better than Legends Arceus, and they're doing more. And with the more, we have seen some frame rate issues from the previews, but
depends on the
it's probably on
trailers
older builds. So
we saw one trailer. I think the North American version ran like crap, and then they released like a Japanese version, which some people speculated was on a better build. Who knows? But either way, it ran way better. It just ran fine. So.
Anyway, my point is that there's another game, right?
Yeah. I would say that one shows off very specifically exactly the limitations that the Switch has, because I would say like the Pokemon models, they've got a big upgrade. And you see things like the world geometry itself looks a lot better. Distant detail on the world itself, in general, compared to like Legends Arceus or Pokemon Sword and Shield, looks a lot better. And even close-up detail, compared to like Sword and Shield, looks a lot better. But then you look at things like textures, and then you're just like, the whole resolution of these is just so bad. Like, I feel like other than the texture resolution, the game looks pretty good. Like, it looks like really good. For Switch, specifically Switch open world games, it looks good. It's a very simple style, but it's clean. But then you get like these horribly low-resolution textures, and I'm just thinking like, why? Like, why are they so bad? Even for a Switch open world game, I feel like Pokemon Company's engine maybe just isn't good at streaming textures or something.
I don't know. It's getting better every year, so we'll see.
But it takes just so much effort to like make an open world game for Switch that I don't feel like they're doing too terrible a job compared to like what I think a lot of third party companies would do.
It's just like I know that if they were to focus on making a game every 3 years, that the games would look and run better, right? But because they come out with it, and you know they have a division of labor, so it does help them. But I mean, like
Pokemon Company should go if they want to have a game every year, then they should go like the Call of Duty devs. They have 3 completely separate teams that make a game over the course of 3 years.
They do have separate teams. There's been a team working on Scarlet and Violet probably for about 3 years since Sword and Shield finished.
I mean, like, they have completely different offices. Like, it's not just, like, separate teams inside of, like, one company. It'd be like if there was Game Freak and Game Freak 2 and Game Freak 3, but they weren't called Game Freak 2 and 3. They were, like, actually different companies.
They're probably friends. They probably want to still work together.
I was saying, like, if they want to do that, then, like, actually put, like, huge teams on each project instead of splitting up one normal size.
Even though I'm a little bit disappointed by Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, like I think it was kind of a bad remake. Like it was okay, right? But it's definitely
artistically it looked nice.
Yeah, it's just it was no Heart Gold Soul Silver, or even an Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Like I thought those are better remakes. Just because. So hear me out. Soul Silver, Heart Gold were the Pokemon games you played for a while, right? Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire were the Pokemon games you played for a while. Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, you played them for like a month and that's it. You know? Like the way your structure is completely different. Like after you played Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, you went back to Sword and Shield for competitive Pokemon, or you played Legends Arceus, or both. That's what Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl just had a much smaller role for the world of Pokemon than previous remakes did. There was a lot less put on its shoulders.
Didn't need to happen.
It did.
They could have just not released it, and
it was just like
because Arceus came out 2 months, a month later, 2 months later, 2 months later.
But people would have been like, "It's not a Gen 4 remake." I mean, I'm kind of in a way, I'm glad they did this because we got Legends Arceus, which is like a new experience, and it's almost like if you look at the Legends Arceus and Brilliant Diamond,
I feel like everybody who wanted the Gen 4 remakes feel like they got like a crappy version. Though.
What they should have done, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and Legend Arceus should have been one game. But the thing is, that would have been so cool that whatever we're doing for Scarlet and Violet would have been like, yeah, we don't care. Let's just continue to play Legends Arceus. Like, imagine if Legends Arceus had all of the Pokemon, it had the badges, right? But that world, that type of exploration, that type of interactivity, but with the multiplayer competitive battling thrown in, with the story and the post-game, like, even though arguably Legends Arceus had a better story, but the point is, if they kind of merge both things into one project, which is what I was hoping they were gonna do, that would have been the bee's knees. But that's not what happened. Granted, Legends Arceus, I mean, it's still like arguably one of the best Pokemon games ever made. So, you know, it's fine. But yeah, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl is definitely like one of, if not the worst remake Pokemon's ever made. And it was outsourced. It's not a bad remake. It's just very, all right, this is what it was, and here it is again. So it's pretty now with some quality of life changes. It's okay. It's not bad. But there's a super chat here that's been there for a little bit. I want to get to it. From Taker again, thank you very much for the super chat, Taker. Who gets a release date first? Next Mario or Metroid Prime 4? He said MP4. I'm assuming you mean Metroid Prime 4 and not Monkey Pigs 4. It's easy. It's going to be the next Mario.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I kind of feel like the next Mario is going to come out next holiday, and then Prime 4 is going to come out in 2024. So naturally, you would expect Mario to be release date be announced first.
It's possible to go the other way around.
They'll both be announced at relatively the same time at E3 2023.
Yeah, I think we may see both at next E3. Yeah, but I feel like Prime 4.
Although we could see Mario earlier in the year.
It's just with Mario games.
I don't want to overshadow Zelda.
We have a little bit of a history of a quick turnaround between like reveal and release. Meanwhile, Metroid, we're like, well, you know,
I could
been known
definitely
for
see
years.
them having announcing or teasing at least the next 3D Mario in like an earlier direct.
Bro, what if they did at the Game Awards? They're not gonna, but what if they did?
I mean, if they did a tease of the Game Awards, it kind of line up for like the first tease we saw for Odyssey. You know, because we saw that, but we saw that in like October.
It's just we don't see new game announcements usually, like at least major ones at Nintendo. We see updates on major stuff. We can see major updates on things we know about, like for example, Tears of the Kingdom or the Mario movie. But I don't think we'll see like the first footage of Metro Prime 4 or the first footage of the Mario there. Like we're gonna see those things in a direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though there was once upon a time I thought we were going to get a Prime 4 teaser at the Game Awards, but in hindsight, no. Yeah.
Hindsight is 2020.
I mean, back then we had like Reggie wearing the Ridley shirt, and there was the rumors of Metro Prime.
Back then we had Reggie.
Trilogy. Yeah, we had Reggie. Yeah,
we just put a period on that. We just had Reggie.
Yeah, we had Reggie. Having Hope 5, yes, Xenoblade Chronicles X was open world, and that was amazing. It's actually might be my favorite Wii U game. Really good.
It's one of the best.
Yeah.
I assume you're not counting Breath of the Wild because you view that as more of a Switch game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Breath of the Wild I count as a Switch game. Because I played it on Switch, and it's better on Switch. So. It has a higher resolution, better audio quality. And it's portable.
You can't really tell.
Yeah.
But it does run a lot better.
Yeah.
It does run a lot better.
Yeah. Dory CJ, I didn't get a chance to play Monkey Pigs 3 because we were talking about Monkey Pigs 4. MP4. That's your Prime 4. Yeah. I said Monkey Pigs, so yeah. Alrighty. So, where are we? Oh, we're far. There's another game I want to mention before we move on. We don't have to dwell too much on it, but Monster Hunter Rise. I think that might be the most impressive third-party game. In a lot of ways, it's maybe arguably the most impressive game on Switch. It's got a lot of high frequency detail for textures.
It also has like a lot of tried and true. I mean, it does listen to like Nintendo philosophy. It takes some new techniques when it makes sense, but then it uses older techniques as well. Like a lot of the fur that they use is just like shell textures, which they've been using forever, just like textures stacked on top of each other to make it look like fur. It's just a very high quality version of that effect. They are using RE engine, but they're not really pushing like too much of the actual like features of the RE engine. They're just using a lot of like really high quality tried and true methods, and it works out for them. I will say one thing I foresee being a big improvement for like a Switch 2 Monster Hunter would be like the size of the battles and the things that happen in them, because I think the monsters could get a lot bigger, like a lot bigger. I also think that there could be a lot more like destruction, because there's like some pre-baked stuff in Rise where you can break something and it like falls in a predetermined manner. It's like very, very limited, and there's very few of those types of objects. I think it'd be freaking cool if in the next Monster Hunter we just slam a huge, axe into the side of a beast that goes flying into the side of a building. And
I had so much fun with Monster Hunter Rise. I want to get back into it, but I just don't have as much time as I used to. Man.
Yeah, doing stuff like that, or like more limb destruction stuff, because they have like obviously you see.
I think part of the problem with that is it's not just a technical issue; it's also a rating issue.
I think you can go a lot farther and still keep it. What is it rated, like teen?
I'm assuming it's teen.
I think you can go a lot farther with teen, to be fair.
Also, there might be like a PETA issue. Like I feel like.
Plus, do you think they would go to M? Is Monster Hunter Worlds rated M?
Is it?
I don't know. I
doubt it.
Rated M.
It's about hunting monsters, not people.
So, my idea wasn't about people either.
Well, my point is
why are you bringing up people? What does people have to do with it?
My point is that it shouldn't be. I don't know. it's rated. Monster Hunter Rise is rated teen, and I'm pretty sure Monster Hunter World is also rated teen.
Probably. And the same thing, they have more graphics, which was your point, was it might be more gruesome, so it might get rated higher. But I don't think so.
I mean, if they had like a lot, I don't know, maybe you could probably get. I guess the thing about cutting off heads, I don't know.
I didn't specifically say heads, but I do think it would be fine. But yeah, I want to see like bigger monsters. I think also like the types of events that could happen would be cool. I don't know. Like Monster Hunter Rise looks great. It plays great. But I think that there's gameplay elements that they could ramp up to the extreme if they had
the
more
monster models and the player models look super impressive, especially for Switch, right?
Great.
The way you can move about in the environment, like that's something kind of
fun,
very unique to Monster Hunter. It's awesome. My only complaint really, I mean, sometimes I feel like there's so much texture detail, like there's so much going on that's maybe a little bit hard to see what's going on in the environment. And you know, maybe
there's a lot of aliasing in certain maps, which can make it hard to see.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe with better resolution, like that might be they might clear that up. So you know that may be the case. But also, while I think there's good geometry for the monsters and the character models. I think the actual environment has a somewhat low geometry, and it's noticeable.
I would say that that's the same for Bayonetta 3 as well. Like, the character models in Bayonetta 3 look absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Bayonetta, you see the detail, like, on her shoes and the guns, and there's all this ornate jewelry and armor. They zoom up to the guns, and
there's so high-resolution textures on those models. Like, crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of you have to focus on one or the other. You have a very limited geometry budget. You can only render so many triangles on Switch. So you can either spend them on the characters, which was the focus of both Bayonetta 3 and, like, Monster Hunter, is like the characters and the fights and the action, more so than the environments, which didn't get as much focus, unfortunately. Because, you know, you got a limited budget. So.
Yeah, I'm very curious how... I don't know, like, it's almost like I kind of want Nintendo to move on to new hardware soon. But the problem is that when they're going to move on new hardware, they're still going to develop games with Switch in mind. I want them to go beyond Switch so we can start to see games that are just made...
That's the kind of thing we're seeing right now on, like, the Xbox Series X and the PS5. It's like almost every game is cross-gen. So a lot of people are like, it's not that big of a difference. It's like, well,
the thing is, they also have to make the game so they can run on the previous systems because they don't want to alienate their user base. But I mean, imagine a Zelda game that could never run on Switch. You know, like I think back to what we saw with that Wii U tech demo, right? But imagine a game that looked like that, but it's a giant open world. You know, like Breath of the Wild.
I would love that. Absolutely love it.
It'd be crazy.
Yeah,
I think we're at least 5 years away from seeing that, though.
Oh yeah, I think by the time the next like big Zelda comes out, or like those kind of games where Nintendo needs to push beyond the limits of what the Switch could do, I think they'll have time, like, to grow an audience, because you're not gonna get like Tears of the Kingdom comes out next year. Say that the Switch also comes out next year. You're gonna get like that cross-gen. You're gonna get like a version of Tears of the Kingdom made for Switch 2, but you're not gonna get Tears of the Kingdom 2. You're not gonna get the next Zelda for like 5-6 years after that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of big.
I'll hope and pray it's 3 to 4, but it'll ultimately get delayed to 5 to 6.
Yeah. A lot of those types of experiences aren't gonna come for a few years, and Nintendo also, like, this is gonna be a huge leap for Nintendo in terms of like power. And the types of techniques that they need to adopt to utilize that power is going to take them a bit.
You know, I'll say this though. We're talking about this now, but I bet once the next Switch comes around, this is also a point that I think is lost oftentimes when we talk about this. It's not like Switch is going to disappear. The same games that are coming out for Switch 2 are going to come out for Switch for the most part for a couple of years probably. So
I think third party will be very different. I think there'll be a lot of third party exclusives, but first party,
yeah. Well, I mean, but also like indies and things like that are probably still going to come to Switch.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
So I mean, well, the kind of games that come to Switch now
Anything that could run on Switch.
are indie games and old third-party games, anyways. But like at Switch 2 will also get new third-party stuff. So I feel like it's not like you're going to get less stuff on base Switch. You're just going to get more on Switch 2.
Yeah.
But it's already the case that we're not getting like the big new stuff.
Yeah.
Switch can get the old stuff, and it's gonna. There's like what we're approaching 120 million like Switch units. We're getting there. Like it's
getting up there for sure.
Like you're not gonna alienate that base. No, you want to use that base. So there's still gonna be games coming. And I just bring that up. So like, don't be worried. Like games are still gonna come out for Switch for a while. Like, but
I do suspect it will be a shorter time than say what we're seeing for the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Because they're going to have a cheaper unit that's easier to manufacture compared to something like the PS5 and Xbox Series X where they're like, super hard to manufacture. Also, it's not going to be launching right in the very peak part of pandemic time.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see smaller, because I think Nintendo will want to like stop supporting Switch for their games because it's going to hold them back, obviously, as you were saying. Like, we want those dedicated Switch 2 exclusives. And that's going to happen, but I think it's going to be more like 1 to 2 years instead of like 3 to 4. But yeah, they're not going to alienate that user base immediately, but at the same time, they're not going to hold back the next Zelda because of the original Switch.
I think also how long they wait to transition will depend on how well Switch 2 sales go.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually curious how strong Switch 2 sales are even going to be. Like, I wonder if people are going to be like, well, we already have a Switch. You know?
It depends.
Yeah.
I think third-party support's going to be big. Like, that's going to attract, like, a new audience even. Like, people... Like, there's a lot of people who don't buy Nintendo because it's, like, they don't want to own a system only for the exclusive games that only come to it. Like, they want, like, something that can play pretty much everything. And there's going to be, like, a whole new audience there for Nintendo. They can see, like, oh, you mean that we can play Zelda, but also the new Call of Duty is coming? Wow, this is crazy.
You know what? I think if Switch OLED sales are like the main seller of Switch, you know, and it's strong, I think that bodes well for Switch 2 sales. Because that just shows that people want better versions of Switch.
I think people do. I think that will be a good indicator of people willing to pay more for a higher quality Switch. I think it won't be the whole story, because I think specifically people have been wanting more graphics for the system, and I think it's a bigger deal than usual. Because usually, like, but upgrading to the next system, we're not fully tired of the last system specs. Like, upgrading to PS5 from like the PS4 Pro or Xbox Series, or to the Xbox Series X from the Xbox One X, like, those are pretty good machines. They're very capable, right? And games coming out look great on them. Whereas on the Switch, we're getting games that either generally don't look good or don't run well. And we're actually getting, like, improvements to game design, the amount of games that are allowed to, like, able to come to Switch, and actually having the difference between a game looking bad and good. Whereas before it was just good and better. I think there's a lot more reason for people to want to upgrade to a new console than usual. Even past, like, exclusive games, which is usually the hook. Usually they rely on the fact that you can't play games on the older console to sell the new console. Nowadays, they don't need to do that as much for this specific generation, because I think the benefits of Switch 2 will speak for themselves.
Hey guys, guess what? There's themes. You can finally get themes.
Yep.
And you can connect a headset so you can have voice chat, proper voice chat.
Guys, the Wi-Fi isn't the worst thing.
That's gonna happen.
Also, our Bluetooth doesn't suck.
I think that one of the biggest selling points though would be if that every game that you have access to on your Nintendo account and eShop transitions over to Switch 2.
I think it will.
Yeah.
I think they've been building up, and specifically the things that I point to are things like their online system and how they completely scrapped like this system where it was like console specific. Like, it's very much like more, it's still Switch specific, but like the way they're doing their online and their website and like all their connective apps all work together in tandem. They're no longer like separate
They're
different
in
accounts
sync.
and things.
Yeah, like you can go to your
Everything's
account on
synced up. You got
Nintendo
cloud
online.
saves.
Yeah.
You got things like that. Like when you have a Nintendo account and you buy things on the eShop, you own that. You get a new Switch, you can still play it. Like you can just re-download it.
Yeah.
Like that was never never really a thing before.
And for a lot of games, you still have your save files.
Yeah, you still got your save files, so you got cloud saves.
But there's ways
like
to transfer
Nintendo has been purposely pushing for this type of thing, and I feel like part of it is because they've been keeping in mind when they switch to Switch 2, people aren't going to want to like not have all their stuff.
You know what's something else that bodes well for this happening? The fact that Nintendo now has a paid online service. Because before they didn't. There wasn't really much reason to have a transition over, because what money were they losing out by doing that, right? They only stood to gain because people would reinvest in like the virtual console stuff. But now that people are actually subscribed, right? Do you really want to get people to unsubscribe from Nintendo Online? No. You want to keep them on, right? They're getting people. And
there's
to buy
no way
in
they have a
N64
separate
online
service for Switch 2, right? Like that would not go over well. I don't think people would like that.
It wouldn't probably. I mean,
it wouldn't work. Like you need the compatibility across both systems. So
I mean,
like you can't just make a new.
At the very least, I feel like something like the N64 Online, Sega Genesis, and like that stuff has to transition over.
Yeah,
if that doesn't transition over, then
I feel like everything has to. And I mean, we saw some stuff when the NVIDIA leaks were coming out that Nintendo was specifically working on stuff to make sure like backwards compatibility works, and that you can plug in your Switch game and it just works. Because there are issues with that. Like it's different from PC to consoles because there's a lot of like fixed hardware.
Yeah.
Not even fixed hardware, like software wise. It's not the hardware actually. It's the software. Like games are made specifically to run on this specific hardware.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Now.
So you get but we saw that they were working on this. Like they knew that there was going to be a challenge just popping a game into your next gen Switch and having it work. And we've seen how they get around this with other consoles like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. They solve that shit. You pop a PS4 game in your PS5, it just works. Like there's no issues. So I feel like Nintendo won't have any issues with that. I think that not that they won't have issues, but they'll sort it out. Like they'll figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. Now I do want to move on. We got to close things out actually, but there was another little topic that's relevant to what we're already discussing though. We've seen that Creatures Inc., a company that helps to make Pokemon, both owned by Pokemon Company and Nintendo, is hiring for next gen hardware development. So basically, what that tells us is that they are now preparing for new hardware. So I mean, I would say basically what it means is by the time we get the next generation of Pokemon, so Generation 10, which is probably going to be 3 years from now, there will be new hardware. Doesn't say too much,
right?
But also it's pretty rare for Pokemon to be out on the system immediately. So I would say this pretty much confirms that Switch 2 is out by 2024.
We didn't get anything in 2017 for Pokemon, did we? 2018 was the first game.
2018 was the first game.
Yeah. Pokemon Let's Go.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, it's about that time, bro. Like, if the Switch is coming out next year, then by this time, there's dev kits already out. In fact, we heard reports earlier this year that dev kits were being sent out to developers for the next-gen Switch. Which, honestly, for me, just all this kind of stuff just really points to a next-year release. Because, like, you don't get dev kits, like, super far in advance, right? Like, most people don't. Like, maybe your super close partners, like the most close
I don't remember that
partners
report, so I don't want to speak on it.
Well, I'm just saying, I remember that being reported on, like, as a rumor. I'm not saying it was a factual report. Let's clarify that was a rumor. You only really give out dev kits, like, a year or 2 years in advance. So for them to, if the rumor's true and they already had dev kits, like, early this year, they're almost certainly releasing the console next year.
Yeah.
Along with the various other factors that we've discussed upon in length in this podcast.
Yeah. I think for whatever reason, where the setup is at right now, when I change the scene, that's when they can't hear you.
Oh, that makes sense.
Does it?
Yes.
It's never been like that before with how it's had set up.
Oh, it doesn't make sense why it's... No, it doesn't make sense like it should be doing that, but it makes, like...
Right.
I see why.
It's the change that could cause the audio issue. Yeah.
Like, I can see that causing the issue. Obviously, it shouldn't do that.
I apologize for that, guys. But, because it's never happened before. I'll fix some stuff. But, yeah, you know, we're having these conversations now because it is the case. You guys better stop making noise. I'm not done with the show. Cats are playing. But we're entering that. I think we're entering that time where the discussion is beginning, right? Where we're starting to talk about it now. And it's not just like we're just talking about it because there's a rumor. Like the discussions we've had, you know, between this video and the video I posted on Friday, they're not because of some rumor. They're because of facts, of hard information. Yeah. We're seeing sales drops, right? We're seeing that Creatures Inc. is hiring for next gen development. These are literal objective signs that we are pushing towards the future here, that Nintendo is gearing up for new hardware. So the conversation's happening. I don't think we're seeing anything this year, so you know, don't confuse any of these conversation points to mean, oh yeah, Switch 2 is gonna get revealed tomorrow. No, but you know, I think there's a chance it comes out next year, and if not next year, then I think for sure 2024. But I would be shocked if we don't see something come out next year. It doesn't have to be Switch 2, just some sort of revision.
Interesting little theory I have about why next year makes sense, and why I honestly think that they might have been thinking about releasing a console this year alongside Tears of the Kingdom.
And maybe Bayonetta 3.
Honestly, at some point. Yes, and Bayonetta 3 is... The DLSS is one of the biggest points that everybody talks about for the next Switch, right?
Yeah.
Like, ever since it was announced in 2018 that DLSS was a thing, people were like, oh my gosh, that'd be great in Switch. The problem is, the lower specs you have, the lower specs you have to drive DLSS. DLSS has a cost. There is a task being performed. Whether it's by AI or not, you have to drive the AI algorithms and all of that on your processor. It costs things.
Sure.
The less you have to take that overhead, then the more DLSS eats into your budget for the actual game. And eventually it gets to the point where, yeah, you can run DLSS, but now 60 FPS games just aren't possible because it takes too much to run DLSS that there's no way you could be able to run anything at 60. And it's very possible that our older architectures and versions of a potential Switch would not have worked well with DLSS, or it wouldn't have been as big a jump as Nintendo was hoping. But one of the biggest things that jumped between the 30 series and the 40 series of graphics cards from NVIDIA was those specific tensor cores that generate AI. And they added, obviously, DLSS 3, if you guys know about graphics, which is like a frame generation. So instead of just up-resing the frame, they actually generate an entire frame only with AI. And that's extremely expensive. So they did a ton of work specifically to make sure that those tensor cores were not only faster, like there's more cores, but every more core is efficient, and each individual core is faster. And the architecture for the 40 series is just better for DLSS. And something we saw in the NVIDIA leak was that they were using a chip based off the 30 series, but had a lot of features that they didn't know which ones they were, but were from the 40 series specifically. And my theory is that they took the DLSS cores, the tensor cores, from the 40 series and actually integrated them into their 30 series chip so that DLSS could work, say, in handheld mode, running at like 10 watts. So, because it was honestly a question of if DLSS could work. Like, we didn't, like, there was a lot of tests, like theoretical tests, that actually suggested that DLSS would not be possible on Switch, at least in handheld mode, maybe not even in docked mode. But now, with the architectural improvements, we could definitely see DLSS. And it may even be that up until now, DLSS actually wasn't viable, and Nintendo was waiting on that feature as part of their next generation.
The longer they wait,
not entirely, obviously, but
the longer they can wait, the bigger the jump.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
But I think DLSS is going to be a way bigger jump than anything. Like the biggest jump will be DLSS.
Man, it's gonna be kind of cool, dude.
In a lot of ways.
Imagine if they do launch this new hardware with Tears of the Kingdom. It just kind of makes sense for them to do that. It really does.
4K, 60 FPS. I don't think they'll get 60 FPS because you have to re-engineer the game to optimize for that.
I don't know.
But 4K 30?
Well, what if they were developing the game with that in mind?
True, they could have been.
You can't say it's re-engineering if they knew what they were going to do with it.
It's fair.
You know.
Could be part of why they delayed it. I don't know.
Maybe. But imagine if Tears of the Kingdom on Switch 2 is 4K 60 FPS. And there's no fog in the background, or not like you know.
There'll still be tricks, but they'll be nicer looking ones, more realistic, not realistic, but better.
That'd be cool.
Obviously, it's not realistic style.
Think about this: Skyward Sword HD is in 60 frames per second. Why would they do that?
I think they did that because motion controls feel a lot better at 60, and one of the biggest issues people have with the game is how it controlled.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice improvement, but don't you think it's weird? Wouldn't it be weird if Skyward Sword's the only 60 FPS out of the game?
It would be. I would love it if eventually Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess got 60. But yes, I do think the next generation, open world games at 60 FPS is impossible on Switch with any kind of visuals.
Yeah.
Unless you have PS2 graphics.
I mean, I still expect Tears of the Kingdom to be 30 frames per second on base Switch, right?
But the next generation, it should be powerful enough. It's gonna have the CPU and GPU headroom, mostly CPU, honestly, and RAM, as I was talking about before. It should have the headroom to push 60 if they want to.
Yeah.
As long as they have the engine optimized for that kind of content.
Maybe.
Those frame rates.
Something that I want to bring up before we close things out, though, right? We were talking about how Bayonetta was struggling to be at 60 frames per second, right? And again, it may be possible that they were developing Bayonetta with a larger spec set in mind, and they were just going to have two different versions, but it just didn't pan out that way. But also, you look at what we're seeing so far for Tears of the Kingdom, right? This is a good video idea. Note that for later. But you look at Tears of the Kingdom, and you look at how we have the patents for all the different bow maneuvers, the new bow maneuvers in the air. And then you also take a look at what's going on with the Master Sword. It's broken, but on the logo, there's an energy blade.
Mm-hmm.
You can make the argument that there seems to be, perhaps, there's some early signs suggesting that there'll be a little bit more focus on combat. And that's important for combat. 60 FPS is important, right? And I think
can be. Yes.
One direction they can improve upon from Breath of the Wild is the combat. You look at what they did with the combat. There's in a lot of ways Breath of the Wild is a huge step above previous Zelda games in terms of combat, because you can use the world to your advantage, and there's so many different weapon classes. But from another perspective, even though in previous Zelda games you just had the sword and then your different items, the sword mechanics in previous Zelda games are above the sword mechanics in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
So it would be nice to see the sword mechanics kind of, catch back up, or maybe they even take a cue from, say, Elden Ring, for example, where they kind of think about how combat works a little bit. Anyways, the ultimate point I'm making here, though, is that perhaps they would benefit the Zelda series to move into 60 frames per second, not just because it seems smoother, because it benefits gameplay. Because they want to go for more fast-paced action when it comes to Link dueling and fighting enemies.
It's possible.
Maybe. I mean, you think about Skyward Sword. I mean, its big focus is combat with the motion controls. And to your point, it makes it flow better. It's a little bit easier to understand. And action games in general benefit by being at a higher frame rate. So, could be something they may be working on. I think that would be huge. I mean, right now we're still not seeing a lot of open world games running at 60 frames per second, even on newer, on the other more powerful hardware, right? So imagine
I would say not until the next generation, like PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. You could run it like 4K 30 open world, but yeah, they weren't running 4K 60.
I mean, what's a great way for the Tears of the Kingdom to come out and really like send a message? Come out 4K, 60 frames per second, and Link talks. Like, I mean, but seriously, you think about what I'm saying though. They could do these things, and if they do accomplish these things, I almost said do, but if they do all of that, that's gonna definitely send a strong message. And I don't know if that's what it would take for Tears of the Kingdom to surpass Breath of the Wild, like to do all these things, sell well on base Switch, but also really push sales for Switch 2. I don't know if that is probably still not enough, but it definitely would send a really strong message about the game and what Nintendo's trying to do with it. So, because right now, with where we're at with Tears of the Kingdom, as you mentioned earlier, yes, we're excited for the game. Yes, we're gonna get the game. Yes, we pretty much talk about it every single week or more so. Our excitement for Tears of the Kingdom is not what it was compared to Breath of the Wild. And I think a lot of that has to do with simply Nintendo and them not talking about it and showing too much of it. Like there's something that's being handled differently, and some of that has to do with the fact there's other games to focus on right now. But it's because
it's not just dry like the Wii U.
Right, but it's also Nintendo's just being super quiet about this game, and so far what they've shown us isn't that different from Breath of the Wild so far.
Yeah, the sky areas look a lot better, but the ground looks like the same.
Looks the same so far.
I will say, dude, imagine not even just 4K 60 for Breath of the Wild. I think if they did 4K 30, but they pushed out the rendering distance on everything, like they just rendered out the grass and the trees and the buildings like way farther, like that would be a much bigger improvement, I think, than 60 FPS for Zelda. But maybe they can even do both. Like they can increase the rendering distance. And since they have DLSS, they don't have to render at 4K. They can render at 1080p.
Yeah, maybe.
Or 720p even. Go up to 4K. You get better detail and 60 FPS at 4K with DLSS. Damn, I'd be impressed as well.
It would be. Stop playing with my microphone. All right.
So I imagine draw distance is a place where like the next gen Switch could really push Breath of the Wild. Because obviously they're not going to make I don't think they're going to make unique assets or anything for the Switch 2 version. It's just going to be the same assets viewed in a better light. So things like draw distance and resolution are going to be your biggest increases there.
Yeah. But I think that's it for now. It's getting late. I think it was a quality discussion, Brandon. I enjoyed it. Guys, thank you for watching the show. Please like the stream. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Share this out to others you think may be interested. But we'll see you all really soon. Take care.
Bye, guys.